2021. This budget committee is called to order. Ms. Hayes, will you please call roll?
Councilman Ford. Councilman Carlisle.
Present.
Councilman Warren. Councilman Colvett.
Here.
And Chair Morgan.
Here. All right, we have 4 items on today's agenda, all within the operating budget. First, we're going to do fire services and city court clerk, followed by police, and then city council. And we've got Councilman Logan joining us online. Just for a little housekeeping, I think there are 3 council members we're still waiting to hear from in terms of grant allocations, and we'll compile the list and disseminate for everybody to take a look at, but I wouldn't expect to see them today. And I think that's it in terms of announcements. So we'll go on. Can I get a motion and a second on the fire services operating? All right, got a motion by Chairman Colvett, second by Councilman Warren. Director Sweat, if you'll introduce yourself, your team, and then the floor is yours for presentation, and we'll hold questions until the end.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Council. Gina Sweat, I'm the Fire Director for the City of Memphis. This is Vicki Johnson. She's my Finance Administrator. And if you are ready, I'll go ahead and start with the presentation. So as we've discussed before, the Fire Division is more than just fire trucks and ambulances. We have 9 legal levels, 15 service centers. Within those legal levels, we have our own services division, logistics, training, communications, prevention, suppression, EMS, airport, and I guess last but not least, at the administrative legal level. And on slide 3, we start getting into the kind of the nuts and bolts of what we do. Part of our strategic priorities, we strive to provide the right emergency response promptly and accurately every day. And we have a vision as a whole to be an innovative leader in firefighting, communications, fire prevention, and emergency medical service delivery. As all of you know, this last year has been quite unusual, and we've also been able to maintain our basic service delivery that the citizens of Memphis have grown to expect, which is excellent. We've maintained the ISO Class 1 rating that we earned a couple of years ago. In the middle of the pandemic, we still were able to maintain that. And as you know, I'm very proud of that. And that's a certification that less than 1% of the fire departments in the country have. We also, during this past year, we were selected by the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services as an ET3 program participant. And that's to help provide alternative transport designations for our EMS division. You hear a lot of work about the fabulous, a lot of information about the fabulous work our healthcare navigators are doing, and this is just a result of that. We still continue to get grants in. I have a very robust grant team that works on getting grants so that we can supplement that work. And last but not least, as you know, we have been ingrained in the COVID pandemic response, from helping lead up the Joint Task Force to working with testing to continuing to provide emergency response. And of late, we have helped Chief McGowan and the City of Memphis take over the vaccine distribution effort. Just want to remind you that as of the last time I looked, there's been over 561,000 vaccines administered in Shelby County and over 325,000 people vaccinated. And the fire department team in the City of Memphis, I should be very proud of that work and what it's meant to our community. I know that I'm proud of it. I think it's probably some of the most meaningful work I've done in my career. But I also want to stress that in the middle of all that, we still maintain our response. We still maintain our EMS response, and with teams facing, a pandemic like never before. Moving on to page 5, we'll start getting into, this is the bridge expenditures from the FY21 adopted budget to the FY22 request. I won't spend a lot of time on this slide because they're broken down further in the following slides. But you'll see that we're proposing a reduction in our personnel services line from the $171 million to, right at a little under 168 million. And our materials and supplies, a little bit of an increase there. Overall, that's going to be about a 2% reduction in our overall request in our budget this year. So moving forward to slide 7 is a breakdown by legal level. And as you see, the bottom line there is about a 2% net decrease in our overall request this year. On slide 8 will be the discussion about how do we get to that change. And there's some key indicators there. The first one is a reduction in the full-time salary line. And that's because this year we were able to take about $1.4 million in attrition that we didn't take last year. And also there's 31 vacancies that were unfunded, 31 vacancies that were at the time of the Hyperion download that weren't funded, and that's about a $2.6 million. There's also a reduction in our and as you see, in this budget is also factored in the administration's proposal for a 2% pay increase for fire. Moving down to, and that's the primary indicator there. Moving down to the materials and supplies. Next year there's a change because of some of the items that were funded through the CARES funds that we won't be funding in next year's budget. And with the new radio system, the new radios, we anticipate that repair of that equipment should go down significantly in the future. Moving to page 10 is the bridge between the FY21 adopted and the FY20 request for revenues. One of the things you'll see, there's some primary factors here. The largest being due to the COVID pandemic this year, we've seen a decrease in our EMS revenue, and our billing service anticipates that will continue on into next year before we make a full recovery. And I'll go over that in the next slide. You see here the driving factors in our revenue change is about a $2.1 million decrease in next year's budget. That is a moderate expectation that Digitech, our billing service, has provided for us. So we hope that we do better than that, but we want to go in and be as conservative as possible. Also, as you know, we received over the last 6 years 3 SAFER grants, and one of those will be falling off next year. And as those fall off, then that revenue, those are one-time grants. So they have a 3-year performance period, and they'll be falling off this next year. And then you see down there's another one, a $434,000. That's a one-time grant that we received for our healthcare navigator work. So we don't anticipate we'll be getting that grant again. Although I will say that my grants team is working hard. They're looking for other opportunities to bring revenue into the city, and we have a SAFER grant application out there, but it'll probably be after this fiscal year ends before we'll realize if we get that or not. Moving on to page 14, you'll see that we have a authorized complement of 1,773. At the time of this of the download from Hyperion, we had 35 vacant positions. We just started a class at the 1st of April, so we don't have any firefighter vacancies at this time. In fact, we're a little over complement in the firefighting position, just because they're in class for 14 weeks. We anticipate by the time they finish class, we will be back below complement for firefighters. Moving on to page 16, as we start looking at our major M&S expenditures, you'll see at the top there is the city shop charges. I was just having a conversation with Councilman Covette about our apparatus, fire engines and fire trucks and ambulances. We have a large number of them. We are expected to keep them for over 25 years, fire trucks and ambulances. And to do that, we have to make sure that they stay in top condition. The 25-year-old engine has to pump at the fire just the same as the brand new engine that we bought. So we have to maintain them in tip-top shape, and that's what that is for. And the second highest expenditure is our miscellaneous professional services, and I'll go over that in detail on the next page. And just of note, medical supplies is very, I'm sure, Dr. Warner, you're shaking your head. I'll just put it this way, the cost of medical supplies is not going down. The pandemic has not helped us there, so we anticipate that will continue to be a pretty robust expense. And on the next page is a breakdown of the different professional services that we hope to fund with this budget. At the top of the list is promotional testing. One of the things that I think is a key indicator of morale is if you're able to provide promotional testing on a regular basis so that people have, are challenging themselves to study and to hopefully get promoted. And so this budget includes promotional testing that is due for this year. Those ranks include battalion chief, air rescue chief, fire lieutenant, EMS lieutenant, and fire driver. All of those promotional rosters are due to be tested. As a matter of fact, we're already working on some of them now. The DigiCheck, just to go over a few of these, the DigiCheck is our billing service that collects EMS revenue. All of you, I think by now, if you haven't heard of Radar,
I tell you this, yeah.
I think we've all heard of Radar by now, so that's pretty self-explanatory. The other one, the turnout maintenance, that's to clean and repair our turnouts. And then Rebound is our injury rehabilitation program that treats our firefighters when they get injured, like sports, like athletes, and gets them back to work faster. Page 18, we have one leased facility. That's our Logistical Services Bureau. And hopefully within, we do have a plan to move out of that lease space within the next couple of years. All right, page 19 is our MWBE utilization. This was our spend as of June 30th, 2020. I'll just bring note that our total certified spend, 15.35%. That was an increase when I started in June of 16. Our number, we were at about 8%. So we've done a lot of work there. Due to the specialized nature of the things that we buy, it's very hard to get that number up to where it is. But I'd also like to report that since through quarter 1 and 2 of this year, our certified spend is at 30.52%. And that can be contributed, so that's double from last year, and that can basically be contributed to Fire Station 43 and the contract down there. And the following pages are our 5-year expense trend report. If y'all want me to, I'll go through that line by line or not. I'll entertain any, yeah, I'll entertain the other things that I presented. And that is it. I'm asking for council to please approve this budget, and we can continue to provide the excellent service that you've grown to love and expect.
Thank you. Okay, questions or comments from council members? Okay, Councilman Carlisle.
I just have one question for, really for Chief Ford and for Chief McGowan. How are we booking the CARES Act funding for personnel expenses in this budget? So I see it for materials and supplies, and remind me, and because I may be wrong here, but we had offsetting personnel costs, right? So how are you booking those?
I think you goes into the general fund, unallocated as federal grant revenue.
Okay, so it'll be at the wrap up, not booked to the division itself.
It's right.
Okay.
It's unallocated across.
Okay. All right.
Okay, thank you. Councilman Warren.
Yes, Chief, how are we looking as far as personnel? Are we in a critical situation? Do you feel comfortable recruiting? I mean, where do you feel like we are as far as having enough personnel in the fire department to do what you've got to do with COVID. And incredible job you guys did with the stand-up facilities and everything you've been doing during COVID. I'm just really proud to be associated with you.
Yes, sir. A lot of what we've done, like Councilman Carl brought, has been supplemented through the CARES Fund, and now being supplemented through the vaccine funds. And most of it is reimbursable expenses. So we're using overtime to cover those positions. People are working overtime. So as far as we are basically back up to full complement. Right now we have a class going through. We don't have, we're pretty good about getting people on the department. Where we do have issues we're still trying to figure out a solution for is retaining them because of certification. People not being able to make it through the certification process to get all the way to paramedic. So that we're still working on that. Still is an issue with us, but we're working on it every day in different programs we put in place to try to help students be successful.
You know, in New York City, when I was there in the 80s, they actually had an EMS academy that they would bring docs in that would teach lessons to keep people doing that. I'll talk to you offline about something we might be able to pull off along that line.
Yeah, no, we do train our own EMTs and paramedics at our training academy. We're the only fire department in the state that's certified and accredited to teach the paramedic program. So we'll be happy. We'd love to have you some more ideas come in then.
It was interesting. They had their academy. They did do that, but they would bring in ER doctors for specific things. If they saw they had a problem with one part of the test, they had them come in and sort of bolster it. So that may help.
All right. Thank you. Councilman Johnson?
Yes, thank you, Chair, so much. Hello, Director. How are you doing, both of you? On page 16, you have all other M&S at $2 million. Can you tell us what you would be purchasing with that $2 billion? At the bottom of the page.
I can. So some of that is seminars and training for personnel. Some of our EMS people have to take, our training folks have to take a class at National every year, so some of that is that. Outside phone, textbooks for fire and EMS, some internal repairs of different facilities and stuff that may not be large enough to generate just come in, different equipment and just miscellaneous items like that.
Okay. I noticed you didn't have any carryover. Did you spend it all last year?
We anticipate spending it.
In that category, all your catch-all sounds like. 16.
Yeah, we anticipate spending our entire line this year.
How much was it last year, do you know?
So when we say other, that's all the other lines under the M&S category. So that's several different lines. That's not just one line that captures other, it's several lines. All of those are kind of.
I was just trying to figure out how you came up with almost 10% on the others, you know, based on what you past history, I would imagine.
Yeah, if you look on page 20, start at page 22. So we picked out the main categories just to give you an idea what the major expenditures were. And then those are a breakdown of the different lines. Primarily that's seminars and training line, the outside supply line, outside phone line, textbooks, internal repairs, maintenance, safety equipment, materials and supplies, and then the rent. So that's just taking each of those lines and adding them together just to give you a concept of what the rest of the M&S was.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not clear on that. Let me take you to page 20. Help me understand the difference between holiday salary full-time and holiday fire, police, and vacation leave and vacation pay, bonus leave and bonus days.
Okay. Okay, so looking at the holiday line, the holiday salary full-time line, that's when they actually take the holiday off,
Okay.
and such as Chief Vicki Johnson here.
Uh-huh.
The holiday pay at the bottom is when the firefighters actually get paid for working holidays. That's extra pay for working holidays.
Okay.
And that would be the same with the bonus days. The bonus days would when people actually take a bonus day off, and the bonus day pay is when they opt to get paid to take instead of taking the bonus day off.
Okay, so what is the difference? Do you get pay and a half? How much is the difference when you decide to work on a holiday?
Well, they don't have a choice to work holidays. They will be scheduled. Their duty falls on a holiday. They will get paid pay, and I believe that is they get paid 8 hours at the 8-hour rate per holiday for that.
Okay. So how much is that? Is that time and a half, or how
No, it's a conversion from, so we have two pay rates, a 24-hour pay rate if they work in the field a 24-hour, or the 56-hour work week, or a 40-hour work week. So their yearly salary is the same, but their hourly rate is different if you work. So the 8-hour rate would be more per hour than the 24-hour rate.
Okay.
So it's a conversion that we do if someone goes from.
Okay. And overtime is regular work, and they just have to work overtime because of the demand at that particular time.
So overtime falls into a couple of different categories. Some of the overtime is kind of built in based on the FLSA, Fair Labor Standard Act law, for people who work a 56-hour week. After they work so many hours in a month, then there's we have to pay them a certain amount of overtime. That's built into the system. The other ones, each of an engine and a truck has a minimum staffing of 4 people on it, and an ambulance has a minimum of 2. If we have people, if people take off sick or injury or death in the family for whatever reason, it takes 411 people each day to staff the actual response personnel in the field. If we don't have 411 people at work, then we have to call in overtime to fill those seats, or the apparatus can't be in service. So that's the 2 reasons.
I have another question.
Okay.
You mentioned that y'all were having a training and allowing individuals to come in to be tested for promotions. If you don't have a position, do they automatically go to a higher rank, or how does that work?
So no, each rank, we have a certain number of positions in each rank. So when someone leaves, say a lieutenant retires, then that position is open for promotion. So then we'll take the next person off, the number 1 person off the lieutenant's list to fill that position.
Like they may be in waiting, they will be waiting after the testing for the next position.
Yes, yes, ma'am. So the list is, those lists, normally we try to have them for a 2-year period. So it's a ranked list for that 2-year period, and as positions open up in the rank that they tested for, we go down the list and get those people.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any other Councilman Jones?
Thank you, and good afternoon.
Hi, good afternoon.
I'm looking at page 20 and full-time salaries. So it looks like we have been in the $80 million range, I say 80 to 90, for fiscal years 18, 19, 20, and the forecast for 21. But we had an adopted budget and a funding budget of 108, and we're asking for 103. So I'm just trying to have a better explanation of the of the difference there.
So if you look at, those years when the full-time salary is in the 80s, if you look, they have the items that are listed underneath there where they have dollar amounts. If you look at our, FY21 adopted and our proposed, those are factored into, the full-time salary line.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you.
All right. Any other council members? All right, I've got a few questions, and the first one would be for Chief Ford or Director Sweat. In regards to the transfer in of $6 million from the referendum fund, it just remind us, please, how that'll be spent.
I believe Chief Ford can answer that.
Okay.
Thank you. Good afternoon, council member. Charlotte Ford, Chief Financial Officer, 5343 Mason Road, Memphis 38120. So the $6 million transfer in that you see is a transfer in from the sales tax referendum fund. And both in FY20 and 21, the administration and all the associations agreed that they would submit part of that revenue as an offset for healthcare costs for police and fire. So there's a $6 million transfer in on the fire budget and also one on the police budget.
Okay, thank you. And you and I both know this, Beth. I'm just trying to get it on the record. That offset is not an additional or new expense by the city of Memphis, but something that's traditionally in our budget as part of the general fund.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And that's why you see it as a transfer in as opposed to a reduction of any specific expense related to healthcare.
Correct. And then Director Sweat, just going over some of the big ticket items. So what we're forecasted to spend this year in FY21 of $197 million and change versus what this proposed budget is of $189 million and change. It's a difference of about $8 million. And, you know, we see the big chunks where it's $4 million less in overtime. Okay, that's to be expected with the pandemic, hopefully lessening. There won't be as much of a need. We're going to miss out on about $3 million in federal grants that can't be replaced. But we're also going to increase salaries by $2.9 million with the proposed raises. So really about $3.9 million less that you'll be working with next year than what you're looking like you're going to spend in FY21. We trust you've done a terrific job. Is this the budget that you need to get the job done in FY22?
Those of you that know, we're used to running a tight budget, and this is a tight budget. I'm not going to lie, it is. And but you know, we've looked at it and worked at it, and I believe this is something that we can work with. And if it is not, if we get into another situation like a pandemic unexpected, you know, we'll definitely be coming back to this body and letting you know that we need more funds.
Okay, thank you very much. And council members, I think that's just something to take a look at where we do have a budget that is increasing by $7 million from what was proposed in FY21 to what this proposal is. But even though the budget was increasing by $7 million, it was a decrease by combined $8 million in the police and fire budgets, even with the pay raises, which were about $7 million. Okay, so just want to make sure and get that on the record. Any other questions or comments from council members? Okay, seeing none, I assume you're all ready for a voice vote. All those in favor of the fire services operating budget, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. This operating budget does pass.
All right, thank you, Council.
Oh, that's right. We're changing the titles, aren't we? I think I missed that email. Okay, my apologies. Chief Sweat. Do we change the titles with the fiscal year, or can we do it? Yeah, right. All right. Let's go on to the city court clerk.
I know.
Can I get a motion and a second for the city court clerk division?
Move it.
Okay, it was moved by Councilman Smiley, seconded by Councilman Warren. And former Councilman Lowry, if you'll introduce yourself and your team, and then the floor is yours for a presentation, and we'll hold questions until the end.
Thank you so very much. We are passing out copies from my administrative assistant, Deborah Pruitt, of things that we've done within the last several months. You can look at those while we're talking. 2 newsletters, a brochure for people in the lobby to take home. You have a QR code page in there, which is the big one. And this was recently developed. We're going to put this on Facebook soon and put copies in the hallway. So when people walk by this, they can put their camera on one of these 3, and that'll take them to a website where they can avoid the lines and pay their fines. Anyway, I think this will improve our efficiency. Needless to say that last fiscal year was challenging, just like it was for everyone else. We witnessed the closing of our municipal court system. That resulted in a reduction in foot traffic and the disposition of cases in the criminal justice complex. Additionally, with the pandemic, the clerk's office was forced to work with significant reductions in our operating account, hindering my department's ability to effectively speak with customers. However, throughout this period, we've had several accomplishments. 1, a telecourt system to reach defendants effectively during the suspension of court proceedings. Administrative support of a hybrid court where the judge is in one area and my staff is in the courtroom for Division 3. This is a test project going on right now. We partnered and developed with the photo enforcement system for S-curves. We also partnered and launched the photo enforcement system for school zones. We implemented the City Court Clerk newsletter that you have before you and the brochure. We've also acquired additional supplementary archive space to meet the charter mandate for an effective keeping of bookkeeping records. And at this point, I'd like to invite all of you on your next opportunity to come over to the City Court Clerk's office so you can see what we do, how we do it, the life of a ticket, and we can show you our new supplemental storage space where we're keeping all of these records. We look forward to FY22 with anticipation as we continue to support the amnesty program, Drive While You Pay, and finding other ways to help the clerk's office to meet our responsibilities for the citizens. Right now, we're looking into maybe a kiosk. When people come into the building, they can pay at a kiosk. So we're doing other things as well. Right now, I want to turn this over to my Chief Deputy, Walter Person, who played a major role in developing our budget. Walter?
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon. We can go ahead and turn to page 2 and look at the organizational chart really quickly. The City Court Clerk's office, needless to say, is much smaller than the fire division. And we have 2 legal levels and 3 service centers. Our legal levels consist of the court clerk and department and the traffic violations bureau. This is the bulk of the physical labor in the court clerk's office. This division manages record keeping, financial transaction, conventional and e-ticket processing, our telecommunications area, and all of our in-court proceedings. And then our second division, or second legal level, which actually has 2 service centers, is the Photo Enforcement Bureau. Photo enforcement has the service centers of red light camera enforcement, which is, I think, a mature photo enforcement system that was actually instituted under Clerk Lowry's tenure on the council. And we also have speed enforcement, which is fairly new, which was instituted mid last year in the middle of the pandemic, starting with S-curves. And as the clerk referred to, we eventually moved into school zones recently. So we'll take a look at the city operating budget on the next page. As the clerk stated, we are focused on really building out this infrastructure for the photo enforcement program. One of the things we found with the photo enforcement program, unlike the red light camera program, which is very mature, we've run into a couple of bottlenecks in there. Of the photo enforcement program, coordinating with police services. But we're working through some of those challenges and also getting the bandwidth to review the tickets. And there's the development and delivery of innovative customer service solutions, including telecourt and the virtual court operations. The clerk alluded to that. We've been forced to be innovative, not that we shirked from it, but given the pandemic environment that we operated in, several times the courts were closed under Tennessee Supreme Court orders. So we were forced to do telecourt, which involved our clerks adjudicating cases to some extent, at least as far as guilty pleas go. If they were guilty, we assessed the fines directly from the court without judge involvement. If they pled not guilty, then we referred them to prosecutors. The hybrid environment, which we're moving to now and is being experimentally tested in Division 3, gives the judge there a chance to work remotely and also sometimes even other personnel, which also gives us a little bit of flexibility. Of course, this is in a pilot stage, and we're still undergoing some development and probably looking for some financing for that. And then finally, the transition from emergency ticket docket storage. When we arrived in the clerk's office in January of 2020, we discovered that a great number of our tickets were moved out of a storage facility at 201 Poplar, and they were moved into a storage facility which is temporary in nature. This storage facility does not afford or accommodate, I think, a clear and effective way to search for tickets and dockets and other information. It's kind of just all stored there. So we've undertaken the effort to relocate to some really high-end, I would say, quality warehousing space so that we can have an accurate and quick retrieval of information. Go to page 4. And ultimately page 5. From an expenditure bridge, our expenditure bridge is fairly simple. As you see in personnel services, we're seeing a little bit of a reduction. That is due to some personnel changes we've had. Even in the midst of all this, we had retirement of a lot of, not a lot, but several senior personnel. We've had retirement of quite a few of our management teams. So a lot of these folks were long tenured. They had a lot of buildup in their employee base, PTO, their salaries were higher. And as we backfill those, we've started with some newer employees. So those costs have reduced. We've had some increase, not from funding, but a little bit of surge in materials and supplies, but not from our funding budget, but it's still a little bit of an increase. And I'll get into that a little later. The capital and service charges are remaining the same. Let's go to program comparative spending. This is where we look at the 3 service centers. The city court clerk TVB area is essentially flat. Of course, I discussed the reduction in your court personnel and we're thinking that's probably going to be something that we'll be able to carry on into the next fiscal year. The photo enforcement division is seeing a fairly significant decrease in expenditures. And that's primarily due to the fact that the photo enforcement division has finally moved from leasing the red light cameras into actually owning the red light cameras. So that significantly reduced our monthly outlay for those cameras. I believe there are 66 or so cameras out there. And we were leasing them at a fairly exorbitant amount, but that price was cut about 40% when we went to just a maintenance contract. And then the speed enforcement division, which is seeing a large increase due to, I think last year we did not foresee a fairly high variable expense related to that. Credit card expenses are charged out at about $4 a transaction. So you can imagine speed enforcement generates, I would say, a magnitude of about 10 to 20 times the amount of tickets we see in red light camera. And a big portion of those will likely be paid by credit and debit cards. So that expense will be incurring as a result of the growth of speed enforcement. Next page. Let's do a drill down into the year-over-year change in expenditures. We kind of covered the full-time expenses, the retirement of personnel, and the other expenses related to personnel, essentially flat, not really major changes there. When we go down to material supplies, we see a lot more movement. You see a large increase in city computer services expenditures. That's due to the effort to really renovate the city court clerk's office and bring it into a new area. You've seen the clerk refer to our QR codes and our efforts to move toward electronic payments. We're also looking at opportunities to install new reader boards, which will make it easier for customers, more, I would say, web interfaces for the customers, which will require more or additional technology interface. So we're really trying to modernize at this point. We're also trying to increase our connectivity and bandwidth between us and the municipal court systems as they start to move into more innovative ways to deliver services. We're looking at our increase in printing and supplies. That's primarily due to moving into, I think, a higher demand expense area. As we move into our new storage area, we're going to start needing supplies to equip and build out that area. We're also going to be using more paper as we go through with much more mail outs and more electronic media communications, because ultimately, by this being a court environment, we still have to complete a lot of these transactions with some type of documentation that is mailed out. Outside postage is increasing primarily due to the run rate, postage expenses, and additional mail outs. Our maintenance expenses, they're pretty much, let me make sure I get that pulled up here. I'll tell you exactly what that is. Our miscellaneous expenses. There was one thing that I wanted to bring up here. The MLK program, which you see at 16.8. Oh, can we go back? I'm sorry. Still on page 8. There. The miscellaneous expense, $16,800. That was due to the MLK program, which we carried a number of years, but I think it was sunset at the end of FY 2020, and we had a weird $16,000 deficit there, and I think it was amended, but it created a little variance in our budget. Outside phone is just really projecting out the new run rate. Phone expenses have increased. Our security expense is really primarily dealing with our cash delivery and cash services at our main office as well as our 5 precincts. Miscellaneous professional services, we discussed that a little earlier. That's primarily the runoff of the leasing contracts and moving into a maintenance agreement with our red light camera. Now, the rent that you see that's going up $41,000, that's for the rent out of the new archive space that the clerk referred to. And then miscellaneous professional services expenses are referring to primarily those costs associated with the speed camera enforcement and the likelihood of having a high number of credit and debit card charges. Again, capital credit card expenses pretty much flat. We can flip over to page 10, look at revenue. We're projecting revenues as being essentially flat for obvious reasons. When we looked at revenue trends, now we're running at about a 12% deficit over 2020. And of course, I would say the last quarter of 2020 was hampered by really a virtual shutdown due to COVID. Well, most of FY 2021 revenue was due to the courts being shut down or the suspension of in-court proceedings. So really, though we're anticipating revenue to be flat as really kind of an aggressive target given where we're tracking this year, which is about 12% below where we were last year. So next page is 11. We have not actual change. Look at the division personnel complement. Our authorized complement, which is page 14, has not changed. And so we've had a lot of transition, a lot of movement of personnel, but the overall complement itself has remained constant. The clerk has been very diligent about managing to that number. We can move to materials and supplies. Our major M&S expenses, miscellaneous professional services, 71% of our budget, and miscellaneous services and charges make up the other 21%. The rest of it is fairly small in comparison. If we look at page 17, which is a little bit of a deep dive into miscellaneous professional services, you'll see that the lion's share of that number is American Traffic Solutions. And that, of course, is our red light camera vendor and provider. So that really is the heart and soul of our expenditures on our budget. Followed close behind it is the conduit speed camera. And this expense is actually a little bit different from the one above. The conduit speed camera expenses here are related to contractual agreements we have with traffic engineering and I believe police services to transfer a certain amount of funds to those different divisions as we generate positive revenues out of speed enforcement. So these pre-existed our administration, but these are significant nevertheless. The Excel Business Solution, office supplies and products. This is just build out of all of our supplies, materials that we're going to need for the archive, as well as storing our existing materials, financial reports, dockets, all of that. CT distributors. This is the expense for our current temporary storage facility. And then we have about $206,000 of other miscellaneous expenses that make up that amount. Flip over to page 18 and look at the lease. This is a dive into the lease that we will be executing probably within the next month or so, given approval, to rent out the space for our archival documents. This is very good quality warehouse space. It's located over on Democrat Road. We have good elevation of the floor, which prevents rodent and other infestation. Temperature control, we got a little bit of solar lighting in there to maintain moderate temperatures year-round. It's our hope, and also based on the experience of prior tenants, that the humidity levels are low, so we shouldn't see much mold, mildew, or pest damage to those documents. Since those documents have to be stored essentially forever, we want to make sure that we execute on our duties appropriately. If we look at page 19, the minority women business, we're at about 8.6%. Now, this is a big focus point for the clerk's office. One reason that number looks relatively low, although we work toward that and we strive toward that pretty much daily, is really due to the size of basically the data service contracts, Conduit and American Traffic Solutions. So the sheer size of those contracts make us have a relatively low minority and women business enterprise spend. However, we do focus on every service that we can provide, such as our shred shops, printing costs, printing expenses, office supplies, our MWBE enterprises. And that brings us to the 5-year expense trend report. I'll dive into that if you like, or stay here and start to entertain questions. So thank you all for your time.
All right. Any comments or questions from council members? All right, Chairman Colbert.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So just make sure I'm up to speed with you. You're paying CT $32,000, but you found a new place for temporary storage. Is that $2,200 a month, I guess?
Well, yes, sir, but that's like a triple net cost. We actually have utilities that we have to pay on top of that, and we're also going to have to pay some upkeep for the surrounding property. Mm-hmm. So, if we look at just I would say the estimated cost is probably closer to $2,700.
Okay, I was about to congratulate you. It looked like you were saving a good chunk of money.
Well, we were trying, yeah. But we could only go so low.
Okay, and because every real estate deal is different. Just out of curiosity, how many square footage are you talking about for that storage?
6,000 square feet.
Okay, okay. Well, I'm not sure lost where I was going. Mr. Chairman, why don't you come on back to me?
All right, Councilman Smiley?
Could you go over the reason for the 42% increase of speed cameras again?
Well, yes. We were more or less underfunded a little bit last year.
Okay.
The base cost of speed cameras is about $57,000 a month. But that $57,000 a month wasn't fully allocated last year. You might not remember back, but we discussed that a little bit in this meeting last year over the phone. The other thing that was not captured in the budget was the $4 charge per credit or debit card payment.
Mm-hmm.
So say if a citizen comes in and wants to pay by credit or debit card, there's also a $4 cost, which we actually have to face the expenses for. It's not a pass-through, for a charge to pay for that citation.
Okay, so in addition to, so if I'm paying something online, in addition to, say it's $100 ticket, in addition to the fee the company charges, there's also an additional fee that goes to the clerk's office.
Yes, sir. It's you know, in the banking world, it was kind of like almost like an interchange, except this is a flat $4 charge. You know, in banking, when you use a credit card, the bank charges the vendor, say, a certain charge for the convenience of that product.
So if I understand this correctly, I guess, more people have paid these, these speed camera fines or fees than originally anticipated, and because people are paying at a higher rate than originally anticipated, there's more fees than we're incurring now than originally anticipated.
Well, it's not quite that sanguine.
Okay.
There was no anticipation of that $4 charge in the original contract. The original contract preceded us coming in. When we were digging deep into it, we found that, and we worked out with the vendor, discussed it with the vendor, make sure we understood. And we also discussed it with the finance team at that time, and there was no pass-through. If you look at red light camera, the way red light camera works for us is the $4 charge, which also accompanies that, is a pass-through to the consumer. So the consumer is told, or the defendant in that case, that if they want to pay by credit or debit card, then instead of the $50 citation, before you incur late fees, you would pay $54. If it went to 100 in your example, it'd be $104. And so the consumer would bear the burden of that cost.
Okay.
But speed cameras the contract was not designed that way.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Chairman Colvett, you're all set?
Is there anybody else wants to get in the queue first?
Oh, there are a couple members in the queue.
Please do. Please do.
Okay.
I'll be like.
I saw Councilman Johnson first.
Alex, how you doing? It's good to see you again. I have a couple of questions. I know you went and told us about this rental space. How long do you think that space will be adequate for you? I mean, I'm sure you're going to be collecting more and more data, so.
We are currently using space at a trucking warehouse.
Mm-hmm.
We inherited that.
Mm-hmm.
And the files are not in order. They're on 2x4 slabs with shrink wrap around them.
Mm-hmm.
That's right. And if we ever had to come in to find something, it would take a few days just to do that. So Walter's been in charge of finding our new space. At 6,000 square feet, we think it'll last a long time. That's what I would say.
Right. I'd say, and the clerk's absolutely right, Councilwoman. The big challenge that we saw at the truck line, one, we don't have 24-hour access to the truck line. We have access during hours that someone's at the truck line. The two, pacing it out, I didn't have any kind of measurement tool. We probably have about 300 square feet at the truck line.
Oh.
So to the clerk's point, everything is palletized, shrink wrap, kind of shoved over into a corner. And it is fenced in, so there's a certain security element there. Mm-hmm. But it doesn't lend itself to retrieval of information, such as if a judge demands it for a trial, or even if defendants demand it. And defendants do come in occasionally and demand a past traffic ticket.
Okay, so you're certain that you have to keep those records indefinitely? There's no time frame?
That's what we've been told, and quite frankly, I hate it.
I think you
No,
need to
I think
check
really
on
it's
that.
ridiculous. I'm not sure how we got to this place, but we were told indefinitely keep all the records. And I think if the council had the opportunity to reduce us to keeping records for only 20 years, that would solve part of the problem. Because we don't find any requests for more than that.
And
May I ask who told you that? Do you remember? Can you recall?
No.
Okay, can't recall. Okay.
I can't recall, but
Okay, I think you should check in that, because we had some of the same problems when I was assessor. And
Okay.
really, they only want you to keep those records where someone may have filed a lawsuit. If a lawsuit has not been filed, there's no need to keep records for that extended period of time. There's always a period of reasonableness.
we are both going to a Tennessee Municipal League conference for city court clerks in the next 2 weeks. That'll be one of the things that we will find out from talking to other city court clerks across the state.
And I'm going to assume that with technology, you're coming up with some way to scan documents so that you're no longer actually storing documents. Everything going forward should be in a storage electronic format that you don't have to store that document anymore.
Well, the resolutions, the big court books,
the dockets.
are dockets.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, that's what we store, not anything electronically.
Okay. A couple other questions. I see where your cameras are costing, what was it, $2 million some dollars a year, the cost of the cameras?
Well, it's close to that. Yeah. Are you referring to the red lights or the speed or the combination?
I think one was the speed, $2 million some I saw. My question, are we actually collecting enough revenues on the cameras? Are they actually paying off the way that was anticipated?
Well, that's a solid question, and the fact is, red light cameras are covering their costs. Speed cameras, is referenced, is off to a bit of a slow start. Initially, I think speed cameras really launched for S-curves in May of last year, and we tracked them for a couple of months, and we were seeing little trickles, so we ended up having the clerk led a conversation with then director of police services, and out of that came kind of more participation in generating some ticket growth, but it's still not covering, quite frankly, the cost of expense for speed cameras. Now, in the latest iteration of this discussion, I had a discussion with the head of Real-Time Crime Center, and the long and the short of that is he has 12 commissioned officers that are dedicated to the Real-Time Crime Center on a good day. And just the sheer volume of speed camera citations is such that they can't process all of those and the red light camera tickets or citations as well. So what happens is they probably focus on red light camera because it's a little more cut and dry, quite frankly, than the speed camera citations. And those same 12 officers are charged with balancing both. One of the things I discussed is, do they have to be commissioned officers? But under state law, the way the law is written, these items are citations, and they're citations as opposed to tickets because there's not a uniform commissioned officer on site to give those citations. The result of that is a uniform commissioned officer has to review them for them to become legally binding.
Okay, I got that. On page 10, we're still saying that your revenue is at $3 million. And then how much is the cameras costing us collectively?
Well, the cameras are costing, I would say off the top of my head, if you look at it collectively, about 2.5 or so. But you have to remember with revenue, we only get credit for revenues that really reside within the court's office. There's a number of, like, court costs and court fines all flow to 111, which is the general fund. So we only get credit for the funds that we retain. If you look at the overall funding, and I don't want to, I'll ask Chief Ford if she can comment on that. There's a lot of funds that just flow past us. I mean, we collect them, but they don't stay on our books.
Okay. Next question. Based general, I guess then from observation, how many people are actually using some form of electronic media to make payments of any type?
You know, I have to get back to them.
I don't know that percentage either.
I don't have that.
Because I just can't imagine a lot of people having computers, using telephone, paying electronically. Look like they
We
still
actually
will be
have seen a
walking in
number of them,
saying
but I
cash.
can't speak to it. Especially in the pandemic, some people were pursuing it primarily out of concern for their health.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if that's going to persist.
I would just like to know, because I know you don't put a lot of money in it, but make sure the end users is actually capable of using those electronic or have them in their possession. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Those are all my questions. I thank you, Chair.
Thank you,
Appreciate it.
Councilwoman. Councilman Warren?
Just to follow up and a separate question, so what I'm thinking I'm understanding you're telling me is for the speeding cameras and the red light cameras, you guys you're paying for those to occur, but unless we have an officer who's accredited to write the ticket, we can't write the ticket and get money. Is that correct?
Right. For speed cameras and red light cameras, the way the state statute reads, there has to be a commissioned officer that reviews it on the video and certifies it as being a legitimate ticket.
So if we actually had a commissioned officer there doing that, what do you think our revenues would be from those fines?
I don't know, but having a commissioned officer at these various locations 24 hours a day would be pretty expensive, though. I don't know what it would be. I mean, if there was one there, I mean, it's pretty.
But they have to do it in real time. They have to be watching the camera and make it work. They can't look at the tape and then decide. Is that what you're saying?
No, what I'm saying is they have to look at the tape before. It's sort of like this. The computer generates an alert.
Right.
And that alert would be like a snapshot, either of a person running a red light or driving an excessive amount of speed. But then that videotape is uploaded to our system where a commissioned officer in the real-time crime center reviews it. And if that commissioned officer says, yeah, Walter Person was doing 50 in a 30 zone, then he certifies it as a legitimate ticket.
So question is, how many minutes or hours does he have to review that in? Can he do it the next day?
Oh, well.
Or can he do it like a week from now?
Yes, sir.
So do we have a backup that people can actually go back and get money for these tickets? And what would be the limitation on timing that you would be able to write that ticket?
They have a 20-day window.
Okay.
For both red light and speed cameras. We just adjusted the window for speed cameras, which was originally 7 days, to 20 days a few months ago to increase the bandwidth. But the challenge is there's so many tickets that even with that, we're only actually certifying a small percentage.
Well, you know, we've got an issue now with people speeding a lot, and we get a lot of letters about that. And I'm just wondering if there's some way we actually started upping this program and talking with the police department to see if they could somehow figure out how we could do that. It seems we might do two things. We might slow people down, because it probably definitely slow me down, and it'll slow, and get us some revenue coming in. I guess the question is, and I guess I need to hear from Chief or Shirley, what can we do to get more people on there, if that makes any sense? And I know we don't have enough policemen, but is that a good way to actually try to slow people down? Yeah.
Restricted to S curves and school zones presently for speed cameras.
Okay.
So the state legislature's got to change the laws so we can put them in other places.
So it's only S-curve in
S
schools.
curves and school zones.
But even with that, we have enough that if we had a policeman looking at it, we might be able to slow people down. Possible? Okay. And I guess my next question is, can you tell me what the MLK program was that went away? What that was due to?
Yes, sir. That was an amnesty program that was actually sponsored by the city council, and I think it was actually introduced prior to our administration. And I can't speak to all the ramifications of it, but it was related to MLK 50 celebrations, and it was extended to individuals that had their licenses suspended for excessive traffic tickets or non-payment. And I think that the city council actually reviewed each of those cases, and the ones that were qualified would receive a certain amount of, or essentially amnesty, to reduce their fines.
And my last question is, where you got these records stored in shrink wrap? Okay, those are not things, because I didn't quite understand your response to Councilwoman Johnson. They're not things that we could actually put in the cloud and copy, or are they physical books that we have to keep, as opposed to just records of tickets?
They are physical books that as of this moment, we've been told we have to keep. And if anyone wanted to go back 20 years, we'd have to go through that facility and shrink wrap. When we get to our new storage facility, they will be cataloged and that won't be necessary.
Well, I guess my question is, as we're heading into the digital age, is this something that the council could pass a resolution and tell you to put it on the computer, or is it something by state law you're mandated? Ms. Ford, you look like you have an answer.
Thank you. We have an official records management service center here within the city. We'll be glad to coordinate with the county court clerks with MTAS, which produces a regularly scheduled record retention requirement for the state of Tennessee. So we'll be glad to help coordinate that.
But I'm looking, if we can coordinate that, would that save the lease on the 6,000 square feet?
There are, in my experience, there are very few records that you have to keep 20 years. Now, there are some that you have to keep indefinitely, but as we pointed out, but we'd be glad to look at that. But I would be surprised if we needed to keep a lot of documents for 20 years, but we'd be glad to look at that to certify and make sure that we're in state compliance.
I think that would be really good, because, I mean, walking in and finding stuff in a trucking warehouse probably is not a great way to start for trying to figure out what you're supposed to do. So I sympathize with our county clerk. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Carlisle?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I would say to the record holding, we need to do one of two things very simply. Either have the city's chief legal officer issue an opinion, or make a request of the state attorney general to issue an opinion on what those records that need to be kept in for what period of time, and then recycle everything else. Would be what I would do in order to stay within the state law. The other thing that I would say is, to answer Dr. Warren's question, it has always baffled me at what a commissioned officer is required to do, is able to do, and what commissioned officers are not allowed to do, or non-commissioned officers are not allowed to do. So the fact that we have to have a commissioned officer, and I understand the thought process, but I would think to my colleagues that we need to reach out to our friends at the State House and see what can be done when we talk about things like reviewing speed tape or red light cameras, and the role of a sworn officer, in reviewing tape and seeing what is happening. And that seemingly would be the fix for somewhere like Memphis. We're not going to find it, because we've been trying 400 or 500 officers overnight. And honestly, 12 officers reviewing tape in a room is not, in my opinion, the best use of their time and resources, which are extremely limited for us. So those are a couple general comments. I have a couple quick questions. So I'm going to circle back to the MLK program here. On outside postage, you make a note of the run rate going up. And so when I look at your 5-year trend line, though, obviously we have a $720 million budget, but it's a penny business. Every penny matters, right, Shirley? Your typical run rate, you don't even get close to the $20,000 marker. FY20 actual was $0, $230 in 19, $251 in 20. You're trending up this year. So I guess my question is how are we jumping from such a low number to budgeting in $20,000 for outside postage?
Well, one thing that we discovered, a lot of expenses were misallocated by previous administrations. One of the efforts that I've undertaken and continue to undertake is to look at where to allocate it. I mean, it's not a reflection necessarily on finance. It's just the way things are done in the clerk's office. We're still in many ways very manual. And so we have members of management that are not necessarily really have a background in finance, and they fill out an expense form and submit it, and it's passed through. And if there's money somewhere, it's paid. So one of the efforts that I was trying to make in this is to start to allocate expenses where they actually belong. And we process a ton of paper.
Seems like a reasonable thing to do.
So that's a big part of it.
Yeah, well, I mean, I appreciate that. And then, you know, from what we've seen in the press, it seems to be there's some issue on the county side, and some of the clerk's office there as well, which is just a comment. I guess the same thing with out-of-rank pay. I mean, it started to trend up. It was seemingly low, trending 18, 19, a significant bump in 20, and then it's kind of stayed along. Well, the forecast is 11, then we jumped back up, we're budgeting 19.
Yeah, well, out-of-rank pay, we hit a bump in the road with that last year. Well, actually this year. Well, one of our members of management that's since retired basically processed it the wrong way. They spoke with some people over in HR, and they were under the impression that out-of-rank pay was supposed to be at full dollar cost. So it was basically the hours worked times the salary, which in effect, out-of-rank pay, at least according to the AFSCME contract, is really only 10 cents more than the basic pay. And that was the way it should have been allocated. And so we have to make adjustments there. But one of the things that we have faced with out-of-rank pay, we're dealing with this kind of out-of-rank pay and other issues because we've been forced to operate with some interim folks as well. So we've got some interim folks until we can get fully staffed back up with all of our permanent people. So we've made those adjustments, but we're also looking at the people that we have that are working in interim capacity.
Okay, thank you. For me, one of the things that I have come to learn in my time on the council and you know, getting an opportunity to be around my colleagues and listen to them and understand some of the plight of our constituents is the punitive nature in some regards of how, and I don't want to say the criminal justice system overall, but certainly traffic courts and the fee-based issues that we run into, and them being long-term punitive from stopping people having economic opportunity because they can't get to and from somewhere, they can't fill out an application, they can't do very basic things. So either in budget wrap-up or now, we need to reinstate that program, and it needs to be funded accordingly. Typically, we balance it out, so I don't have an amendment sitting on my toes unless you want to tell me we can figure it out. You're the boss. I just work here. We're talking about 20K.
Are you making a proposed amendment?
Well, I can move to add it, but I mean, the question is where's the money going to come from? Either out of the unassigned fund balance, or we got to find it and cut it from somewhere else and move it. So what do you want to do?
We actually, in FY21, have some small amount falling to the bottom line, so you could pull it from there.
Let's do it in wrap up, just so we can keep moving forward, but we'll get it take up. Ashley, can you make a note? All right, I yield back.
Thank you, Councilman. Good questions and some eye-opening answers. We're going to go Councilman Canale. Let's go Councilman Canale. He hadn't spoken yet, then back to Councilman Smiley.
Thank you, Chairman. Chief McGowan, do we happen to have any city-owned asset where we could store these records?
We can certainly take a look, sir. As you know, we just moved some storage of some servers here from City Hall, so I can take a look at the adequacy of that storage.
So if we can't get it done in this fiscal, and if we can't get it done in 22, Councilman Carlisle is asking for 20,000. That would save 42,000 if we had something that we already own where we could store this.
There's a 435,000 square foot building just due south here. Plenty of storage.
I just solved your problem for you, Councilman Carlisle. You're welcome. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councilman Smiley?
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just trying to wrap my head around this camera program. The fines and forfeitures about $3 million. And then I'm looking at the, I guess, the photo enforcement speed camera. It seems to me that it seems like we're losing money.
We are.
Okay. So we're losing
on that program individually, and that's what I've been saying. The speed cameras are off to a slow start, and we've talked with the real-time crime center about it. The clerk originally had a conversation, with the then chief of police about it, and it got a little bit better. But it comes down to, when you talk to real-time crime center, it comes down to a bandwidth issue or a capacity issue. There are 12 commissioned officers, and that's the maximum amount that's dedicated to both of these photo enforcement divisions. And they tend to prioritize red light camera because it's a mature program. They're used to it, and it's producing results. Speed enforcement is kind of the new kid on the block, and they get to it, but speeding camera also produces 10 or 20 times more citations than red light camera. So essentially, the 20-day clock runs out before these citations are actually reviewed by a commissioned officer and turned into a legitimate ticket that we can find a defendant for.
Okay, so at any point in time, I guess in the next couple fiscal years, will the price of the cameras decrease, or are we going to be paying this?
No, the way the contract is written for the speed cameras, it's just a fee plus that $4 variable cost charge on top of that for every credit card.
So we're probably looking at
the red light cameras actually had a decline.
Red light cameras go down.
We actually purchased, we're one of the few cities, believe it or not, that purchased the cameras outright. So we own our red light cameras, and we only pay maintenance costs for those. But the speed cameras we'll never own. It's just going to be that charge going forward.
So if the red light cameras are a success, we're making a little money. Speed light cameras, we're losing money, and probably lose money for the foreseeable future.
Well, I can't say for the foreseeable future. What our belief is, and I don't think it's too radical. People are starting to emerge from the pandemic. We're starting to see more and more openings, which means we're going to have more and more traffic. We have more and more traffic, we're going to have more and more speeders. So that's kind of not a good thing necessarily societally, but it's good from a revenue perspective.
All right, so let me ask you this, so make sure I understand this. So we pay for the cameras. Do we also, does your office also pay for the commissioned officers?
No, that's funded out of the police services division.
Okay, and then I think we talked about this last time. I'm almost certain I remember this conversation, whether it, at some point in time we were talking about the speed cameras, whatnot, and the red light cameras. What happens if someone doesn't pay? Is there any way to enforce them? Okay.
No, that's a great question.
Okay.
You want me to take it?
Essentially nothing.
I'd rather for him to say nothing than for me to say nothing.
Okay.
But I will say this: it stays on your record indefinitely. So if you were to get what would be a citation or a summons from a uniformed officer, a commissioned officer, that would also be part of the debt that you would owe to the city, which also could be included on such things as a drive while you pay program or a time to pay program for you if your license was in danger of suspension.
Okay.
If you own the car.
So it's say if you drove through and you got a speeding citation, and provided yours happened to be one of the ones that processed within 20 days, and so that was on the record, and you said, you know what, I'm not going to pay that. Nothing would happen to you because you can't get points. That's under state statute. You can't get points on your license. It's not counted as a traditional moving violation, unless, of course, you get a real or a speeding ticket from a uniformed officer, in which case that would be part of your debt.
Is there any way that we could, because we talk about 12 commissioned officers, we have 20 days for one of the 12 commissioned officers to review. Is there any type of way that we could, I guess this may be a question for
the police department.
You know where I'm going with this.
Of course I do. That's not for us. That's not the clerk's office. That's the police department. And you can ask them when they come up how they handle that.
They're up next.
Okay. Notes. Okay.
Thank you, sir.
All right. Thank you. Any other comments or questions from council members? Seeing none, I assume you're ready to move to a voice vote. All those in favor of the city court clerk's operating budget signify by saying
Quick question.
Well, is it budget oriented or operations oriented?
Just real quick. This may be.
Did it affect your vote?
Probably not.
Then why don't you get together with them afterwards? I'm going to take you up on that tour. I think it's long overdue, and I have a lot of questions as well, but I think they're more operational in nature, and I'd love to see the life of a ticket, as you say.
So you all must see that. When I sat in your seat for 24 years, I never went to visit the city court clerk's office as a part of council. I went over there, but I didn't look at what they did. And I think everybody here needs that opportunity to see that.
Okay, thank you. Again, all those in favor of the city court clerk operating budget signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? Seeing the chair, the ayes have it. Operating budget is approved. Thank you all very much. And we'll go ahead on the schedule. We'll go to a break here, and we will start back at 5:05 sharp.
I will be back soon to see the council again.
our colleagues know we're starting.
Okay, they should be able to hear me on the mic.
I was in the, well,
Collaborative.
yeah, I can hear everybody.
Okay. Interim Director Ryle, the floor is yours if you'll introduce yourself and your team.
So good evening, everyone. I'm Interim Director Mike Ryle. I hope you can hear me okay. 170 North Main, 38103. I have with me Mr. Vincent Easton. He's our finance manager. And with us also is Yolanda White in the back, and she is also with our finance department.
All right, please proceed.
Okay,
we'll reserve all questions until after the presentation.
Very good. Okay. First of all, I just want to say on Friday, you know, most of you know we had a police officer shot, and a lot of you reached out to just check on his status and just want to say how much we appreciate that and how much the officers appreciate that. He's doing fine. Talked to him this morning. Very good spirits. Family's in a good way. And he's just recovering from that wound, but he should be back to work actually shortly. So good news there. But thank you so much for reaching out and just checking on him. Police budget. Page 2 of our slide is our organizational chart. I think that everyone knows most of these front few pages, but we'll go through them briefly. Page 3 is our priorities, which is crime reduction, police recruitment and retention, which you've heard a lot about, community outreach, which is one of our big focuses, and of course, gang intervention. Page 4 kind of breaks it down in a bulleted format, each of those priorities. Crime reduction, we have seen a great reduction in our Part 1 crime. It's down 9.5% as of this time last year in comparison. Our concern is our violent crime, which is up about 10%. We've heard a lot about police recruitment and retention. If you remember last year's budget presentation, we had 2,065 commissioned officers. This year, as I'm presenting to you now, we have 2,017. So you can see kind of our concerns about our recruitment and retention piece. Community outreach is huge. We're in schools. We do educational programs. COVID pandemic didn't help us at all in that realm, so we had to rethink the entire thing for the last year, and we were ready to get back in some good momentum there. And our gang intervention efforts, part of that is an educational piece where we go to schools and try to educate some of our young people about gang life and how to get out of gang life. So it's been very, very good for us. Page 7, we get into the expenditure discussion, our bridge. And if you look at FY21 adopted budget, it was $281,479,497. When you make the adjustments and encumbrances, our funding budget for FY21 was $282,690,888. Our proposed budget for FY22 is going to be $275,888,266, and that's about a $6.8 million change from FY21 funding to FY22. So it dropped about $6.8 million. Page 8, page 9, we get into our comparative spending. FY21 adopted, of course, was that $281,479,497. After our roll forward encumbrance, our council approved revisions, our FY21 funding budget. And this just kind of breaks it down in our legal levels just to give you an idea. But again, you'll see that $6.8 million decrease from our funding budget in FY21 and our FY22 request. Page 10 kind of shows that $6.8 million breakdown, where it came from. Page 11 and, of course, page 12, those 3 pages just show an itemized reduction and variance to show where that $6.8 million net change came from. Move to page 13, our revenue discussion. FY21 revenues and our bridge to FY22. Our revenues for FY '21 adopted was $9.8 million and some change. Once we made our adjustments, it was $9.854 million. And then we reduced some revenue changes for $117,806 to make our FY '22 proposed revenue $9,737,000 even. Page 15 just shows that breakdown where we came to the $117,806 net change in our revenue. Page 17 and 18 is our authorized complement sheet. If you notice, FY '21, we had a total of 3126 as an authorized complement. FY '22 did not change. We have a authorized complement of the same number. We did have an increased service level, and I think Chief Ford went over that Thursday when she made her presentation, but we have one analyst in our multi-agency gang unit that we're going to try to hire full-time so that we can embed that analyst into that group there. 19, we're talking about materials and supplies, and if you turn to page 20, our FY '22 request, it just shows the breakdown of the M&S for police. And we'll start with the biggest numbers. Our shop charges, our shop fuels, about $8.8 million is what we expect. And if you break it down the list, you'll see it from large to small. But our total for FY '22 request is going to be a little above $30 million. Page 21 shows our professional services, and we still support Safeways at $100,000. Retired Chief Jim Harvey kind of works on our radio project. That's $110,000 for him. Child Advocacy Center at $105,000. University of Memphis for psychological testing for police, $45,000. Our 901 Block Squad is $350,000. That's our youth gun violence intervention group that help us there. Promotional testing for officers is $560,000. And then we pay NEMARC a little over $1 million for temporary employees to help out in our background as we try to hire police officers. Our leases on page 22, we still pay rent to the Shelby County government at 201 Poplar for our 911 backup center. Our multi-agency gang unit is housed at Old Getwell. That's $411,000 and $411,600 in leases.
Thank you.
Our RTCC, our Real-Time Crime Center, pays a lease to Methodist Le Bonheur at 600 Jefferson for $206,720. Union Avenue Extended, we pay rent there for our Internal Affairs Group at $235,000. And our Neighborhood Watch also at Union Extended for $45,000. And our reconciliation for CJC and our Union Extended lease is $366,341. Total lease is $1.6 million and some change. Page 23 is our MWBE participation in FY, as of June 30, 2020. MPD was at 43%. MWBE, our total spend as of that date was $7.4 million. And if you look at page 24 through page 31, that's our 5-year trend for comparison. I'm not going to go through all the numbers, but I'll be here, Mr. Eason and I, if you have any questions on those pages. But that's our 5-year expense trend. Our other funds managed by our organized crime unit. In FY '21, we had $1.1 million in revenue. Our expenditures for that FY was $4.1 million. Our FY 22 revenue expected is $1.5 million, and our expenditures for FY 22 is expected to be $3.2 million. So the difference on that number is a negative $846,207. And the last page for our presentation is that 5-year trend expense report for our organized crime unit. And barring any questions, that's my presentation from police.
Okay, thank you very much. Go to council members in the queue. We'll start with Carlisle, then Councilman Warren.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hey, man.
How you doing?
I know there's a tear that's coming somewhere along the way when you're like, gosh, this is my last budget season. I'm just so sad.
So there was a tear earlier.
He's already expressed on the record that after decades of being in the police department, he's going to lay it all out right now and to let loose. So go ahead, ask him anything.
That's right. One thing that's interesting, I mean, I hope it's for all the right reasons. The sex offender registry fees have gone down. I'm not sure what the direct result of that is, but I'm going to assume it's for something good, like people potentially leaving the area. But that's not really a question, more of an interesting note in your budget. My question is somebody in their second year of budget with such a large division that I've never been able to fully understand is well, first off, in your 5-year trend line, I want to make sure that on page 24, do we have a wrap-up typo, Shirley, on their FY 21 adopted budget through FY 21 funding in stage 2? It jumps from I think it was 143 is what we approved last year, and showing it at 163,795. Right. So in our budget book from last year, we approved a budget adopted of 149,419,504. Right. And so in my 5-year trend, it says the adopted budget was 163,795, 134. That can't be right. So page 24 of our slide presentation, full-time salaries.
And then page 155 of the large budget blue book.
Yeah. And then if you want to go back, page 296 of last year's adopted budget.
What do we have here?
My guess is it's simply just an error, but I guess we'll take an extra. Well, even the adopted budget line would be wrong.
The full-time salary is about
$504, right? And then if you on our slide presentation, it says the adopted budget was 163,795, 134. So my question is, let's just assume the adopted is wrong. The funding budget is accurate at 163,795. Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Got it. So, okay. So we're going to run over this year. My question is what is the expectation? How are we moving from 145? How are we moving from a $145 million adopted budget to a fiscal year stage 2 request of 163?
The 145 is actually our forecast, the budget for 21.
Guys, I hear you. We approved a budget last year of $490,504. Your presentation has that number at $163,798,134. That clearly is an error. But I also understand that number really is your funding budget for this year. You're forecasting 145. but you have a funding budget of 163, right? Where is the delta, and how do we move $18 million?
Good.
Please.
Chief Ford?
Thank you. If you will look on page 155 of the proposed budget book, let me see if I can kind of help with the situation here. It appears that the full-time salaries line in your 5-year trend is rolling up all of the numbers of your full-time salary, holiday salary, full-time, vacation leave, bonus leave, and sick leave. So to your question though, for FY budget adopted, our number is 149,419,504. Our forecast number is approximately 142 million. So I'm not real sure what happened on this 5-year trend.
Yeah, what I actually have my math on the forecasting in the budget book adds up, and maybe I did it wrong, it was $145,050,344. But anyway, that delta is insignificant to me. That's like a $20,000 difference. So again, what I'm not understanding is.
What about job incentives?
Please speak into the microphone, Councilman.
Point of information, does the job incentive line that's down, that goes to 0 this year, have anything to do with going from 19 to the 18 million you're talking about?
No, that's in May.
And I've got the same question, because if you look, not even looking at adopted budget, but FY22 proposed,
Sure, you see that.
On page 155 is 143, and the presentation is 163, and all the other columns match up perfectly in terms of the numbers that are there.
So you're saying that the retention, is job incentive the retention line item? And we booked it. That's the wrap up. But that depends what it is.
Sure.
Line, entry 51219, job incentive ledger. So on an average year, it looks like it runs somewhere around $15-16 million. Obviously, it bumped up last year, and I'm sure we can talk about why in a second. But if it were running around that 18 to 20, that would make sense. Yeah.
FY20 job incentive actual was 22,000. We really have 0 budgeted.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
25,000.
Yeah, that's not in thousands. This budget is not being shown in thousands. It's not 19 million, it's 19,000. Sorry. Yeah. So again, we still have a significant delta there that I don't understand, and it could just be an error. I'll tell you what, while you guys are, while finance is tracking that down, Chief Rowell, I have a question for you that I think is at the heart, and this probably it wouldn't shock me if this question gets asked every year, because I fully don't understand it. We have an authorized complement that has around 500 vacant positions, of which we approve. We can't possibly fill that. That money may get spent every year, but in addition to basically, let's just say we hire 200 additional people, even with 0 attrition, we get everyone to stay this year. That means there's 300 vacant positions. And on top of that, we also go ahead and basically pre-authorize that overtime line item. Where do we end up spending that additional money? Do we overshoot our overtime every year? Tell me where those funds actually typically end up. And I'll tell you what, I'm sure it can go many places, but let's just take large bucket items.
It has been my experience that most of it has been overtime. I can recall one year that we might have the numbers off. We may have been projecting 18, and going into the third quarter, we were all, at the end of the third quarter, going into the fourth, we were already at 18. So.
Okay, thank you.
But he can elaborate more.
It appears that the full-time salary budget is off by $20 million. There's the A word that we don't talk about anymore. It should not have been included in there. It should have been flat. If you add up the column there, it actually adds up to about $20 million more than you total. If you go to the bottom of page 25 of the presentation, it says personnel services is 245, 193. If you add up all the numbers there, including full-time salaries, you come up to something like $265,000. So it's not 245. They backed out the word formerly known as attrition. So it appears that the salaries are inflated by about $20 million to account for that.
For that word.
But it's not, but it doesn't run down. It's hard keyed in or.
That's right.
Yeah. But it's not summing right either. Okay. I'm not really sure I understand the Excel side of that thing, but I got it.
So in summary, the presentation is inaccurate, but what's in the budget book is.
Correct.
Okay.
Well, there goes that.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. So to Councilman Jones's point, most of it goes into overtime. And I think for me, you know, this goes back to my conversation with when Kim Bailey was here. I have been fortunate to be involved in large organizations, and I'm not sure, and I don't understand our processes for how we manage our overtime at the precinct level, how it's authorized. I recognize that we have staffing shortages, we have holidays, we have all these things that cause it, but really don't have, and I guess it's more on me to come and spend more time down and learn about that. But from an oversight standpoint, we've got to be better about our technology and how we manage and authorize and audit our overtime because it is such a significant line item. And ultimately, I think for us as legislators, when we talk to our constituents, you know, we say it's overtime and then they want kind of a deeper explanation. And I honestly really don't have anything to tell them other than we have staffing issues. And to be frankly honest, I don't think that that's very fair.
So I will address part of it. I do know that the police teams do monitor their overtime by precinct, by event. So we do know that we can track it in that manner. But exactly to your point, we also are 100% confident that the new time and attendance system is going to help us tremendously to be able to detect either changes or, and Director Ryle and I have talked about this, about how we manage when, you know, a police officer in this precinct who goes to work overtime in another precinct, and that we're being able to actually track that accurately, that we feel very confident that this is going to help with that situation. I will also point out that some of the overtime this year we have has been attributed to COVID, but it is more in a line with FY20's actual overtime, which was, you know, we only had 3 months of a pandemic in that year. And that's why we felt very comfortable coming in with a little bit lower number for this year as well.
Thank you. That's helpful. But again, you know, I think when we have these talking points, and when I say I understand from a high level the cause and effect. I have to, I guess, need to do my job better in getting down and spending more time to understand the day in, day out policy procedure. I couldn't run or operate a Wendy's grill if I didn't go and actually learn how to do it, right? So I recognize that. I think it's critical that we continue to push on those things so that we can be more accountable. I think it's critical that we continue to do all we can to hire police officers. I recognize that overtime has become somewhat of a fringe benefit, so to speak, for a lot of our younger officers that have the time to do it. But I worry also that it's become something that they kind of depend on in their and how they calc their take-home pay. And I know that creates a problem when we talk about culture change. So as we bring in our new police chief as a council, you know, those are things that I think we really have to lean in on while we start looking at tools for recruitment, whether it's take-home cars, retention bonuses, housing assistance to get officers to live in neighborhoods that they have higher crime rates. But there's just a lot to tackle here. And I'll just say, again, holding myself more accountable, I need to spend more time learning about it, and that means spending time at our precincts. I'm sure those guys are really excited to hear that. So that's all I've got for now. Again, I'll just keep saying this until the time comes. Director Ryle, just couldn't be more appreciative of you and your service and all that you continue to do. I know that you've got your head down and you're working every day, even though there's a sunset on the horizon, and just appreciate the continued effort to make Memphis a better place.
Hey, thank you, Councilman. And to your points, they're all very valid points. I think it needs to be understood that the bulk of our overtime is to fill complement. The bulk of the reason for that is officer safety. We have 9 precincts. Each precinct has 6 wards. We need at least 2 officers per ward. But I do agree with you. I think sometimes when you touch and feel that kitchen in McDonald's, you learn how to make a hamburger better. So we welcome you to the precinct, and we would love to show you around and just see and touch and feel how it works.
Thank you. Councilman Warren?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I had a couple questions. One, was the sort of difference in the budget as far as overtime? Did we have a decline because of less Memphis in May and other things? And then we had an uptick because of our Black Lives Matter protests and also because of COVID, and they just sort of washed this year? Is that why it sort of came out about the same?
From our standpoint, yes. Everything you said is an accurate picture of what we dealt with for the past 12 months since March of last year. And because of COVID, the events did diminish, but protests kind of increased, and so it was a counterbalance, for lack of a better word.
Okay, so as we start to open up more, we're still going to have some of the COVID things, and I think we still have the possibility of more protests or other things going on in the future. Is that sort of, have y'all put that into the thinking process of this for your request for overtime?
Yes, sir, we have.
Okay. Then totally off topic, do we need as a city to continue to pay county rent for a backup center if we've already got a 911 center in city property? If so, why? So I can explain that to people.
So technology is a wonderful thing, but it can break down and stop, and we can't stop. So that 911 backup center at 201 Poplar is crucial for our day-to-day operations, so that when we do have to transition to a backup site, it has to be ready and functional. It has totally been upgraded there, and at this point, the 911 board has put a lot of money in renovating that, getting it ready, and it's housed at 201.
Okay, excellent. And does the county pay part of that cost?
I don't think they do on that rent. It is paid by MPD.
Okay. I guess my last question is, I did not hear about our officer being shot, so if you would please give my regards and to the family. And
thank you, Dr. Warren. I sure will. I'll pass that on.
All right. Thank you, Councilman. Councilman Smiley?
I just wanted to follow up on what we heard from the city court clerk in terms of, I guess, commissioned officers monitoring the speed cameras and the red light cameras. I wanted to know, are we using reserve officers to do that, and what we can do about having, I guess, commissioned officers man it at a more frequent rate? Because right now, as it currently stands, the program itself is losing money, and it has a lot to do with that, I guess, 20-day window to review the tickets. I was just trying to figure out what we can do in terms of getting officers to man it so we don't, I guess, miss that 20-day window.
So that's a very, very good question. It's funny you brought that up because I had a discussion with one of our chiefs today about that very topic, and even to introduce the thought or possibility to use reserve officers in that commissioned role. The problem with the cameras is we have to have a commissioned officer sitting there monitoring that infraction, because it's just like writing a traffic ticket to somebody. And it ties up a commissioned officer, and to the tune of thousands upon thousands of infractions that are noted on that camera system. So we are looking at ways that we can staff that better, but it's very difficult because if we can put an officer in behind a camera system, we sure do need them on the street as well. And it puts us into a quandary, and it does create a backlog in our observational opportunity by staffing that. We need, just on red light cameras alone, we would probably need 5 or 6 officers just to make it flow better. We don't have that luxury.
So right now, what's the current, I guess, process or program in place for officers to, I guess, man, I guess, the camera station or whatever it would be called?
The process right now is to put an officer in front of that video monitor, and they sit and review infractions all day long.
How many?
Got an email this morning that we are probably dealing with about 30,000 a month.
So we have one officer reviewing about 30,000 different.
We have more than one because obviously it's ongoing. I don't know the complete staffing, but we are working to fill gaps as we can. But it's a lot of infractions going on with our speed cameras and red light cameras.
Is there a line item in this budget that speaks specifically to this? Because I mean, we have a program in place, one, to deter folks who commit traffic violations. And we're also on one side spending money to, have this program in place. At this point, I'm not even sure if it's worth us having a program in place if we don't have, I guess, the officers to I guess, sit in front of a computer or a screen to watch what happens. I'm just trying to make sure if we're going to continue to go on with the speed enforcement cameras, I want to make sure the police department is adequately staffed so we can do this. I think it'll be something important to this council because I think this council talks all the time about what can we do about speeding, folks violating traffic laws, drag racing, and these cameras are put into place to deter those things. These cameras are put into place to see what exactly is going on. But if we can't monitor it, then the camera's just up there for no reason at all. Scare people? No, okay. But I mean, okay, I digress. That's a good question.
We have 100 still officers, I believe.
Volunteers.
I'm sorry, Chairman.
Speak into the mic.
We have 100 or so officers, I think, roughly around the amount that sit in our volunteer police department. I think that's what we call it. They're considered sworn officers of the law, correct? Could they not do that part-time for us?
So are you speaking about our reserves?
Reserve, thank you.
Yeah.
Volunteer was not the right. Reserve officer program,
Yes.
thank you.
Councilman Smiley did bring that up, and actually I met with the chief today to talk about that very thing, to see if our reserves could fill some of that need, because they still are commissioned, and we do have them, but our reserve ranks are diminishing as well, and with the kind of opening of some of the public forums like Memphis in May, we have a race at the end of the month where we anticipate about 3,000 people coming out. Our reserves are now a vital component to our day-to-day operations in that front. So it's a challenge all the way around, but yes, that's duly noted, and we'll definitely look into that.
Okay, let me, so we mentioned that the officer has to be in front of the camera. Is this real time, or at some point, as long as it's a 20-day window, I can review the footage and get it done?
That's correct. It's a window of time that you need to get it done. And I think you're right. Because of the staffing issues, we are losing an opportunity because that window expired.
So let me ask you this. So I know every officer is not on the street. So every commissioned officer is not on the street. I'm assuming there's some officers that have reasonable accommodations that would have to be, behind a desk. Is there any way that we can use some of those officers? I'm just trying to figure out how to make this program make sense.
So, for example, we have officers that we put on non-enforcement.
There we go.
But that name implies non-enforcement. And that means that we don't expect them and will not allow them to go out and write a citation in the real world, so we can't put them in front of a camera because of the status of being non-enforcement. That means we've taken that ability away from them to cite people, enforce laws, and things like that. But we could possibly look, sometimes we have injured officers who are still commissioned that we could look into to see if we could better utilize them to take them away from precinct duties, answering phones, so forth and so on, and put them in front of that camera because they could satisfy that component because they're still commissioned. They just happen to have an injury.
Okay.
Yes, sir. Yes,
Okay.
sir. So that's an option there.
So potentially using injured officers to review the footage within the 20-day window.
Right.
So tell me if you can do this. I'm pretty sure I think I already know the answer. I might not like it. JB Smiley runs a red light or speeding, whatever. I get a ticket in the mail. Can you just send it out, or you just someone has to look at it and someone challenges look at it within the time? Like, I'm just trying to figure out.
So we have to confirm that the infraction was committed.
Okay.
We have to verify through that video piece. So there's some a checklist that we have to go through, and to do that, we have to have a commissioned personnel sitting in front of that so that when they see Councilman Smiley running that red light 3 times, you have to actually see that to make sure that that encroachment happened properly.
Okay, but how about this? So I'm assuming you're looking at hours of footage, or are we only pulling the amount of footage in which I guess the camera sees someone driving past or running the red light?
So
or are we looking at 1,000?
Ultimately, we're interested in the video portion of the infraction, but it's labor intensive to drill down on that, and the numbers are so massive of these cited videos that are coming into our queue. So
So could we have a non-commissioned officer pull the footage and then have a commissioned officer say, okay, look at it. When they,
Councilman, let's wrap up this line of questioning if we could. We're drifting a little bit into the nuance of operations rather than budget, and I give a lot of leeway because almost all operations impact budget. But we could be here all day talking about state law and commissioned officers versus this and that. So
I think you get my line of question. I'm curious in seeing how we can make this program effective as opposed to where we are right now. Thank you. You, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. We're going to go to Councilwoman Logan, who is on the line.
Thank you, Chair, and Director Ryan, thank you for the presentation. I just had a couple of questions. One about does the budget speak to or incorporate the civilian positions that could potentially replace the officers that are doing the taking care or addressing or providing the civilian positions? We talked about that during I brought it up during the time that Chief Smith was presenting, and just wanted to follow up to see if the budget included that, as well as the audit that was done that spoke to a lot of time being consumed in travel. Did we find any ways to shore that up so we can free up some officers as well? I yield back, Chair.
Thank you.
So as far as the budgeted positions for civilians to do certain things that officers are currently doing, I don't know that that's built in this year's budget. And as far as I think you're referring to the Deloitte study of how to do better time management. We have reviewed that study, but we have not built anything into. We are talking about taking some of the recommendations from Deloitte and doing some internal things that could better build a better time management system, but that's done just internally at this point.
Okay, so do you know how many positions, have you all identified how many positions are being handled by commissioned officers or officers that could be civilian positions? I know one area we talked about was finance and paperwork and things like that.
Well, no, ma'am, I don't have that number with me today, but we can get back with you in the next few days and try to give you a more definitive answer to that question.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. You're back, Chair.
Thank you very much. Councilman Warren?
Just two quick comments. If we are able to figure out some way to use reserve officers or other injured officers to help with this traffic light issue, is it, or can we can we use the monies made for that to offset the police budget to pay for the salaries coming out of the clerk's office as opposed to coming out of the police department if they're working in that department? I don't know if you can do that, but if you could, it would sort of like put the cost where the cost was, and I didn't know if that was a possibility. Thank you.
So I'm not sure to that answer as far as the revenue from there could be used to pay salaries.
Council, we'll take a look at that. There's another model, as you know, Metro Alarms administers the Metro Alarm and fines there, and any costs that are in excess of running the program are given back to public safety to offset their response to false alarms. So we can look at that model to determine if the monies that are collected by the clerk's office are in excess of those necessary to run the program, if there is a possibility of doing just that to determine if it could be an offset or a transfer in to cover the cost. But that's a good point. We had not looked at that but that's something we could take a look at.
I guess my last thing, I wanted to make sure I understood. Your reserve officers, they can't write tickets, so therefore they can't serve in this position?
No, sir. I'm going to check on that because our reserve officers are still commissioned and they can work as a police officer. But again,
which group wasn't commissioned?
The non-enforcement officers that have been, their enforcement powers have been taken away either because they're being investigated for something, they could not work in that capacity.
Thank you very much. Okay, thank you very much. We'll go back to Councilman Logan.
Thank you, Chair. I'm sorry. I had one of the questions I didn't get to ask. Concerning I heard you say that your numbers are dwindling for the reserved officers. How often do you all take them in? I had a constituent inquire about when is the class, or how do you get on the list or access that? Can you elaborate or let me know where I can get that information?
So there is some training that's involved to get a reserve officer up to speed so that he can be ready to go. A lot of times our officers will leave the job and then try to become a reserve down the road. So there is a gap of time where they have to go back through some training. Because of COVID, we have been limited as to our ability to build a reserve class. That is kind of on our to-do list so that we can kind of build this staff up. Reserves have to commit to so many hours a month to perform certain tasks for us to hold that reserve status, and we had to scrub our list this past year. And that's what caused the dwindling, because some of our staff on our reserve list were not committing to the hours that they were required to commit to, so we had to remove them from that status as a reserve officer. So I can get some information to you when our next class is going to be, so that they can submit their name and inquire as to what they need to do to become a reserve officer.
Okay. Are you good, Councilman Logan? I think so.
Yes, sir, I am. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. I've got a couple questions before I get to some larger overall themes. Promotional testing, $560,000. I feel like I'm used to seeing that in the HR professional services rather than in y'all's. Is that the case? Has it been removed from HR and placed into police operating now? Or has it always been there?
It's always been there to my knowledge.
Okay.
It's always been there.
It's in both. So, and that's where we've had a debate about promotional testing, is usually during the HR budget. And so what's the difference between the promotional testing in HR for police and the promotional testing in police for police?
I'll let Chief Smith answer that.
Okay, we'll talk about that when we get to HR.
There are some technical differences between between the two batteries.
Okay. And then also a question about overtime. In your best opinion, Director Ryle, what is the appetite if there were additional monies allocated to overtime to be spent for operational duties, whether it be directed patrols or an additional, investigator overtime, whatever it might be? Are y'all drafting primarily people into overtime, or is it still very much volunteer oriented? And would there be an appetite, or are people just worn out that if there were more hours and shifts to be filled, that it would be very difficult to fill them?
It's kind of a combination of everything. I think we have to be careful about working people too hard, too fast. It creates safety issues, fatigue issues. So we are looking closely at numbers of hours worked, trying to monitor that a little more closely. We have to make sure that our officers are alert. I think somebody mentioned it earlier that young people tend to grab when they can get it. And we have to kind of help guide them through that maze because they can be overworked. Primarily 80% of our overtime is spent to fill complement. Some of our overtime is spent to do exactly what you just described, is to be able to do some more proactive policing and get into areas where we know problems are, because the rest of the officers are spent on just answering call to call to call. But sometimes to put more money into the system can create great fatigue, great officer safety issues. It can create a bigger detriment than it can to really satisfy the solution, if that makes sense. So we really have to watch the spend closely to make sure our men and women are taken care of.
And you feel for the most part that we're at that point or approaching it where we need to be more cautious about the hours being worked?
I think we are at that point.
Okay.
That we just need to be cautious and make sure that we do our best to do our job with what we've been provided to do it with.
Okay. So one of the things that stands out to me in this budget is that it's $7.5 million less than the FY21 forecast. And there are a couple of things that explain, well, you have the ADC going down a significant amount, which is a good thing. You'd want that to go down to zero, so you'd expect more to, but that's also offset by the proposed salary increases. Another one of the big bucket items that is going down from FY21 forecast to proposed FY22 is a total of $3 million between the health insurance choice and select plans, where we're forecasting to spend about $25.5 million this year, and then we have got it down to about $22 million for this proposed. How is that budgeted down almost 14% in healthcare costs from year to year? Why that dramatic of a decrease? Go ahead. I assume it's part of a formula that we plug in.
It is. It's part of it is the difference between the cost of the two plans that moves. Basically, there was not a change in the premium for FY22, but the way you might select how your plan goes in and there is a pretty significant cost difference in this.
Okay.
Right.
And is that the numbers are bigger here because of so many more people in the police budget, but is that percentage drop reflected across the entire budget?
It depends.
Okay.
On what the selection was by the employees within that division.
Okay. Then one of the other big buckets for the decrease are the full-time salaries. And if I were to look at that 5-year trend where we were doing great in FY18 was a low number, 136, and then FY19, 142, and then about 149, and now we're back on decline in terms of full-time salaries we're paying into the police services. And all that while police salaries have been going up. So even if we were to stay the same, we'd expect the full-time salaries to increase at the same rate that we've been increasing the salaries. But we've got a decline, and so to me, that's a big indicator of manpower and complement within the police department. And that has been one of the number one priorities, I feel like, of this government, is to increase the police complement. And now I'm looking at a trend that we're, you know, 2-year trend that we're back down on the slide. And that's, I think that is a big problem for this community. I think y'all recognize it as such. What is is there a solution in this budget to address that? Is that going to be coming later in HR as well? Because on face value, I know we've already been making efforts. We've been trying new things. We've been looking across the country. And to be honest, if we're on a downslide right now, it's not working. Or that there are new elements on the national level and the local, regional level that we're struggling against. So my question is, you know, what are we doing to address that problem? And is it reflected in this? Okay, are we doing anything that would be reflected in this budget to address that downward slide? Or is it more in the policy department?
I'll take a stab at that, Councilman. So, number one effort there is this accurately reflects what we believe to be the manpower over the course of the year, and that includes a class of 100 that we're recruiting for right now. So we believe that we can get that class of 100, and then starting another class in the spring by the time they come on the payroll. So, and we're on pace to get to that, but that'll just get a little uptick to where we kind of were, as you accurately reflected a year ago. The second piece that we talked about earlier when the mayor presented was the retention program. We view that as equal part recruiting program as well. Kind of the one-time bonus and the opportunity to do that for recruiting and retention over the next 3 years. We think that will make us more competitive in a very tight market to get people here. And that's not reflected here, but will be in the wrap-up. You'll see this budget go up pretty dramatically, and that would be reflected in the overall personnel services line to be higher than it was last year by a pretty large margin. And we view that as a pretty attractive retention tool and a recruiting tool for those folks who are coming into this class, because they'll be able to forecast 2 years down the road that I'll be essentially 9% higher than what the base budget or the base salary is located now. So we think that's a pretty bold move for recruiting and retention.
Thank you. And I respect the way the administration budgets and the thoughtfulness that y'all put into it. But I think this is where we would differ in some philosophy on budgeting. And it's not reflective of the police department or the budget that y'all put together, because this is a much bigger, broader city issue in the entire scope of our budget of when we talk about priorities and the number one problem that we're currently facing and how are we addressing it. And I feel like sometimes too much our budgets look the same from year to year with slight adjustments. It's almost a copy and paste with some amendments. In my preference, when we're facing life and death problems like the safety of our people, and it's the number one responsibility, I would want to start from the ground up and rebuild exactly the way we think it should look like. It would be a long-term process, but I'm not sure it would come out to be a budget that would look similar to what last year's did or the year before. So again, that's not a reflection of y'all. I think it is more a broader philosophy of how we address a very difficult problem with limited resources. And I see different points of view on this, but I think respectfully, that will be one of the reasons why I'm voting no today, along with the referendum funding, which we discussed a little bit in the fire services budget as well. So thank you all so much for the time. Are there any other council members in the queue? I see Councilman Jones, and we'll go back to Councilman Carlisle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm looking at page 21, the NEMARC. Do we have an estimate of how many temporary employees and background investigators that this $1.15 million encompasses?
So, I don't have, I think it's in our backgrounds, I think we have, if I remember right, we have 5 people, but it's not all backgrounds. I use that as an example because we're able to hire people part-time. But we have other, stations where we use part-time staff to kind of help get things moving on the day-to-day.
Okay, so this is all personnel costs for individuals who are temporary employees?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
But, okay, and then so these are background investigators, not background investigations. Okay.
Right. I'm sorry.
Well, no. Reading this on the middle, I didn't read. And then for the motion that was made and the budget that we have been asked to approve is in the funded amount of $275,888,266, correct?
Right. Correct. Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Carlisle.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One is operational, but it impacts the budget, which is to remind our colleagues again to join the administration and the police department to continue to apply pressure at the state level for assistance. I can't tell you how often someone comes up and they're so thankful that they see Memphis police officers on Sam Cooper and 240, and I have to kind of put my head in my hands because that's where they have to be instead of being out in our neighborhoods and talking to people and hanging out at the Lester Community Center, right? And so we really do need to continue to try and get assistance from the Tennessee Highway Patrol, which they could even do on Riverside Drive, which is technically a state highway, and they don't, and it's a drag racing strip. So that's to my colleagues and to the public. And to that point, at one point we were having issues with police staffing, and we turned in a very temporary manner because I don't know how expensive it was. And I know they're having staffing issues a little bit, but to the Shelby County Sheriff's Department down on Beale Street and some certain events in which we share, I guess my question to you, and it's probably maybe a little bit of a hot button line to go down, but how does the police department look at augmenting certain responsibilities with private security contractors?
So let me start with the Highway Patrol. I agree with you. I had a great conversation after I sent an email and a letter to Colonel Perry. The very next night, I saw 6 Tennessee Highway Patrol heading downtown Memphis. They do need to absorb their responsibility in our state highway systems. He is in agreement of that. He has staffing issues, he said, on his own. But he is definitely willing and wants to support Shelby County to assist in our state highway systems. He said that he sends some Tennessee Highway Patrol officers here on Wednesday through Saturday to help out, which he does. The sheriff has agreed to assist us on Beale Street over the weekends, so they're down there with us now. So we are definitely looking out for our partners to assist, and they are very, very supportive in agreement with that. So that's working well, and hopefully that will continue for a while to come. If the Highway Patrol can do what they ask or want to do, they're going to try to build an academy of about 180 troopers to come and help out with some of the problems in the big 4 cities in Tennessee so that they can support all of us. I don't know what you're indicating when you said private security. What are you asking there?
I mean, on a short level, on a low level end, and easy. I'm not talking about Blackwater. So everybody take a breath, although you just never know. For example, Chief Davis made a passing comment in her appointment about how she drove by, and maybe it was in our meeting, I can't quite remember. She drove by Beale Street and she saw 12 officers on the top end and 12 officers on the bottom end. Obviously, Chief Davis has never been around during Barbecue Fest. Gets a little crowded, can get a little out of control. But the reality is that really the responsibility of the Memphis Police Department to have that many officers on that street versus private security detail? Obviously, police officers need to be there, but in what capacity? and in what numbers, right? They certainly work all the time, and I'm sure many of the private security officers here are off-duty police officers. It could grow. I mean, again, this is probably for another time because we're talking budget here, although it could end up in a budget line item, but there are private security companies out there that could augment some of the things in which we do. We receive assistance from the federal government, the state government for our multi-agency gang unit. Again, I'm not an operator, so I couldn't answer that directly other than to say it always seems to be a manpower issue. We can't find sworn officers. There are certain things that our state constitution says has to be done by sworn officers. And there are certain things in which there is a gray area, so to speak. And I'm just curious to know, and again, probably for another time now that we're getting down into it, but it's a manpower issue for us, right? And we all bang our heads against the wall when we look at these resources and where we can get help from. And so I throw it out there as another possibility, whether it's Protect Security on Beale Street and the Blue Suede Brigade downtown, or something that's a little more heavy duty. But again, I don't know. I'm not an attorney in federal and state law, so I don't know. It's just one of those things where it always seems to come back to manpower.
So Beale Street does have private security that works the inside of bars, clubs, and restaurants. We maintain the street. We work closely with them. We try to develop a plan with them. We work in good fashion with the business owners and proprietors on Beale Street, but we primarily hold the streets. We use private security in our 170 North Main, City Hall, and some other venues that we used to tie up police officers to do. So it worked out well with some of those decisions that were made to kind of privatize some of those points so that we could get more officers on the street. I'm not in disagreement with you. I think we need to be careful, though, when you get into some of those situations like you described on Beale Street that can get pretty tense real fast, that we need some commissioned officers out there to kind of maintain some of that.
Okay, back to Councilman Logan online.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to see you all come back during wrap up and present again, but having incorporated the information from the study that you did. I think it's really important that we had the audit done. If you've had the audit done to have incorporated the recommendations, we definitely want a complete complement. And any of these areas that have been recommended, there are a number of things that have been brought up today as far as reserve officers, having civilians to replace some of the commissioned officers that are doing those jobs that they could do, and then taking in account what the results of the audit were. So for me, I would be interested in seeing how many officers that would free up, and how that would improve our standing right now with those things taken under consideration. So I would love to see you all come back after you incorporate that during the wrap up, because there are a number of things that were questions today.
Okay, Councilwoman Logan, we're going to go to the administration and police services for response, and then I'm going to come back to you as to whether you want to make that into a motion.
Yes. Okay.
Let's hear their response first, and then I'll come back to you.
All right.
Thank you, council members. You have heard us countless times talk about recruiting and getting police officers in here, and I assure you that is a very top priority. It is. We try to build our budget to be realistic, to live within the means that we have, and for a division that represents almost 40% of our budget, we are 39% of our budget of general fund. Or we were talking about general fund budgets here, right? Okay, just for clarification. So I would love nothing more and would gladly come back every single council session you have asking for an amendment to the budget. If we have a full recruiting class, they've made it, and they tell me they need more officers, and we have more officers available, I would love to have to do that for you, to come back every single session and say, I need to amend the budget because we have 50 more police officers. I need to amend the budget because we have 100 more police officers. I would love to be able to do that. And this, when we devised this budget this year, and I'm going to go back to the benchmarks that the mayor gave us as a basis for this, is to not lay anyone off. And we have been able to do that through pandemics. We have been able to do that when other cities have suffered, and we've been able to manage. And part of that is through your allocations, your approval of our budgets, and us coming to you with recommendations, us coming to you with requested changes. So we have based this budget on what we think is reasonable for this year. And obviously that is up to you to vote, but that doesn't mean we can't come back to you and ask you for more money if we have more police officers that can be hired and brought on board. And we would love to be able to do that. So thank you very much for your consideration.
Councilman Logan or Director Rowell, do you want to add to that, or?
Just to agree, we would be willing to come back and support anything this city wants to help move that needle.
Councilman Logan, and come back to you. Would you like to make that as a motion?
Yeah. I'd like to make that a motion. I move that we have them come back after they have incorporated the findings from the audits, as well as having surveyed their complement to see what positions can be civilian positions, and the reserve officers, incorporating the reserved officers for some of the things that we've talked about today.
Okay, Councilman, I say we can make a motion to delay. We can't force them to really change the mayor's proposal. We can change it with amendments, but we can make a motion to delay with guidance from the council on what they would like to see incorporated or adjusted. So if we make that motion to delay, I just want to be clear.
Absolutely.
That if they think something's not in the best interest of the city, they are not forced to make that recommendation to the council. All right, I have a motion on the floor to delay police services operating budget until wrap up. Is there a second? Councilman Jones seconded it. Is there any discussion on the motion? I see quite a few hands. I saw Councilman Carlisle first, then Warren, then Johnson. On the motion, please, to delay.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I appreciate what my colleague is saying and the information that she's requesting, and want to be supportive of that. I've read the entirety of the Deloitte report, and while there are recommendations in there, they are significant in scope, and that work needs to proceed, but it would be reckless and unlikely to have, I'll just take this for example. In order to digitize a department the size of the Memphis Police Department is not just throwing a number out there in this fiscal year. Now that recommendation has been made, and honestly, a consultant should be hired from the outside with someone in the inside in order to put together the roadmap and the timeline and the costs associated with digitizing the Memphis Police Department's back of house processes, how they file paperwork, how they do that online, building out that database. Those things cannot be done and should not be done overnight for an organization of that size. The civilian position is a conversation I think that's been ongoing for 4 or 5 years. I think that's something that can be accomplished, at least in some scale or scope. But I guess what I'm saying is I think I'm not in favor of delaying the budget to try and get that information in a 2-week period, because I think it's much broader and bigger than that. If you read the report, you'll start to understand that. However, to my colleague's point, she's absolutely right. And I think it's incumbent upon this council to continue to bring the police department back and continue to, much like with MLGW in the Baker-Tilly report, continue to make that a topic of discussion for us so that the work gets done and it's not just forgotten about. So I want to, Councilman Logan, I support you and I hear you, but I'll be voting against the motion just because I'm not sure that work is it's reasonable to have it to be accomplished in the next couple of weeks. With that, Chair, I yield.
Councilman Warren on the motion.
Yes. you know, I understand that we ask a lot of good questions tonight, and it's been my experience in dealing with the administration that they like good questions. They like to bring us answers. I think that trying to delay this vote may send the wrong impression to our community, that we're not really backing our police department when we are. For that reason, I would like to vote against the motion, have us vote for the budget, and then have them bring back at the time of reconciliation comments about why what our questions were either good or bad, actionable or not actionable, and then we can discuss that with them at that time. So I'll be voting against it for that reason, but I understand the reason the motion was made. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilman Johnson on the motion?
Yes, I too understand the reason that the motion was made, but I also see this as just a general overview. We just recently appointed a new police chief. Let that individual have an opportunity to come in and review the budget, and maybe some new suggestions may be coming as a result. So I cannot support the motion at this time, but I understand why, and we'll be expecting it further down the road, but I cannot support it at this particular point. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Councilman Jones on the motion.
Thank you. In my nearly 13 years of public service, I've seen too many studies come and go and just collect dust. And without there being any sense of urgency, I just don't want this to be the next study that we spent a couple $100,000 and there's no real plan of action to implement it. So I will be supporting this for that very reason, that I don't want this to be the next report that's going to sit up on the shelf of Memphis Police Department and any other halls of government in Memphis and Shelby County and just collect dust like the previous ones have. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any other council members on the motion? Okay, Ms. Hayes?
Chair,
Yes. Who's speaking? Sorry.
this is Councilwoman. Yes. May I speak?
Go ahead.
Okay. And I just wanted to make sure that everyone understands that I totally support. This is not in opposition or resistance to the police department, but it's just to make certain that the things that we have mentioned are being included. You know, I know that the mayor and his staff are doing a great job of trying to provide us with the budget, and I'm not asking to deny them. I'm just asking them to come back and wrap up and include either the information that I've requested or a plan on how it will be done. I heard my colleague Chase Carlisle, Councilman Carlisle, that it may take longer. Well, even in that case, if they are not able to bring the information, there needs to be some type of plan, or we would like to see some type of plan on how and when those things will be incorporated. But to just approve tonight without those things that we've discussed being substantially addressed, I think would also be reckless on our part too, considering how long we've been trying to increase the complement and the situation that we're in, looking at 400 homicides this year. Our situation is too dire for us not to take every step. And all of the information that was done by the study that HR commissioned or got done, and the public safety ad hoc committee we met on for some time, and those are some of the things that we asked for, and we were not meeting just to be meeting, but we want to see these things actually incorporated into the plan and into the budget. The budget is the area that we as legislators address, and so we want to make sure that the mayor and the staff know that we are in sync with you in terms of wanting to see solutions. So that's why I'm asking, because those things have been left, unaddressed or unaddressed in the budget per the information that came forth today. It was stated that those things were not incorporated into the budget. So that's why I'm asking. It's definitely not in opposition to, but it's supporting the need for us to utilize every opportunity to increase the complement to where it should be and to make our streets safer. I yield back.
All right, thank you. Councilman Smiley on the motion.
I think, Councilwoman Logan, if you could do me a favor, could you succinctly say why you're requesting a hold? Because I'm trying to piece it together, and I just need you to succinctly say why you want to requesting this body to hold.
I wanted to hold because there are some areas that came up today that were not included in the budget as it was presented today. For one, the study that came out, or the audit that was done, it talked about some areas of savings and some things that could be done to reduce, to save money, or highlighted those issues. And number two, we wanted to see, I had asked at our last meeting with them, how many positions that are being held now by police officers that could be civilian positions, and I hadn't heard anything since the request. And so I think that's very important. If there are a number of positions that could be civilian positions, and we have commissioned officers doing them, that's a concern for me, because we need every officer that's capable to be out, in neighborhoods and on the streets. And so that was one of the main reasons that I would like to see that number, those positions included in the budget that's being presented.
Okay, so I think this is the same, similar to me and my favorite thing to talk about today, which has been the camera thing. It's not necessarily budgetary, it's more so operational. Okay, I think I get it now. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Seeing no other council members. Surely, we have another council member in the queue. Councilman Carlisle.
Right, I just want to make just a brief statement. I recognize all of that, but it's either we do these things, when we say we support, we do these things out of either in trust and partnership or by holding hostage, right? So my goal here is to do this thing in trust and partnership. We have to bring the police department back and be partners with them in the administration and working on these things, instead of just saying, like, we know you're not going to have this information, so we're going to hold it because we're going to force you to bring us a plan. That's just my point of view. With that, I move the previous question.
Okay. Thank you. Previous question's been moved without objection. So we're going to go to a vote on the motion to hold the police services operating budget until wrap up, with certain recommendations being part of that. Ms. Hayes, will you please do a roll call vote on the motion to delay?
Councilwoman Logan.
Aye.
Councilwoman Swearengin. Councilwoman Easter Thomas. Councilwoman Robinson.
Aye.
Councilman Carlisle.
Nay.
Councilman Warren.
Nay.
Councilman Colvett.
No.
Councilman Smiley.
Sorry.
Councilwoman Johnson.
No.
Councilman Canale.
No.
Councilman Ford.
No.
Councilman Jones.
Aye.
And Chair Morgan.
Chair abstains. By a vote of 3 to 6 to 1, that motion does fail. So now we're back to the original motion on the floor, and I have Councilman Jones in the queue.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know no one probably has this answer to this question, but I'm just curious as to the number of sheriff deputies that we have, because Memphians pay the majority of the taxes that Shelby County collects. And so when I was on the school board, we had the same dilemma. Amen. We pay the majority of Shelby County taxes. Why can't they help supplement us and the needs that we have, even if it's just temporarily? Now, I don't know the number. There's been I think, Ms. McGowan, you and I had this discussion. We talked about it. One of the things that I looked up, and an issue here, is the land size that Memphis has when we talk about our complement. Jacksonville, Florida is much larger, 2 to 3 times larger than Memphis is. There is no Jacksonville, Florida Police Department. It's the Duval County Police Department that patrols all of Duval County, including Jacksonville, Florida. So the fact that we are paying, they're not a metro. Jacksonville is not a metro. The fact that we are paying Shelby County taxes, I'm just raising the question that, to help supplement the, the lack of officers for MPD, even if it is Bill Street, if it is, the highways, the byways here in Memphis and Shelby County, I feel that there should be some of our dollars represented on the streets of Memphis, since Memphis pay the majority of Shelby County taxes.
Great argument for metro government.
That's what we don't have. Councilman Jones, are you like?
That's it, yes.
Administration to respond? Okay, Chief McGowan.
Thank you for that question, Councilman Jones. I will just stick to the facts and say that, number one, to reiterate, this has been, we talked about the Tennessee Highway Patrol. That has been an ask. Chief Ryle has asked the new police colonel, or the THP colonel. So that's a formal ask from the administration for some permanent presence on the highways in and around Shelby County. As to the Shelby County Sheriff's complement, I can't tell you the exact number, but what I can tell you is this, that this year there are more Shelby County deputies. They have a higher complement that was approved by Shelby County Commission because of the de-annexation of Cordova, Rocky Point, and Southwind. The other fact is that when those areas were annexed by the city of Memphis, the Shelby County Sheriff's Department did not lose any complement. So in other words, they have a net increase in complement even before those areas were annexed by the city of Memphis. And so there are more on the rolls today than there were before those areas even came into the city of Memphis. So that's about a $3 million increase, I believe, was the request that was approved last year. So that's what I know. I can't give you the firm number, but I do know there's more.
And the majority of their taxes are paid by Memphis.
63%.
All right, thank you. Any other council members on the main motion? I've got Councilman Logan in the queue.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to make sure that that it's stated, that I state that I am definitely behind the police department 100%. And I do want to make sure that we continue to work together, closely together, to ensure that we reach the complement and that we are able to take care of the citizens' safety. There's so many people in our city that are scared. They are alarmed and concerned, as we all are, with where we are. And so it's going to be imperative that we work together. And that the motion was just that, to make sure we're working together and that we're not leaving any stone unturned. And I appreciate Chief McGowan and Chief Ford for their hard work, and as well as looking forward to working with the director. But we have to make sure that we continue to, when information is asked or requested, that information is brought forward to the council. So it will be seen as though we're working together. And moving forward, I just want to make sure that we work on those things that were requested. Even though the vote didn't pass, it's still very important for us to have that information, for me to have that information. And I will be asking, and I will be supporting the budget, but I definitely will be asking for and wanting to work with you to get the information. Thank you. I do back, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Seeing no other council members in the queue, just in brief response to Chief Ford and your comments, and I do believe that the work of the Memphis Police Department has an impact on future crime. And that not only that, but it brings justice to the victims of past crimes. And the work of the patrol officers to the investigative services from the top down makes a difference And I weigh that against other budget priorities. You know, one directive that you mentioned briefly was that no city employees be laid off. And it is my priority that there would be a few more city employees in the unemployment line than having more bodies in the morgue. And I think that's a decision we are faced with on an annual basis in this budget. And for me, the decision is not even close. So there may be more discussion on that to come, but that's just to clarify part of my reason for a no vote. And again, it's not to the work that y'all are doing now. As you stated earlier, y'all are at the limit in terms of overtime and how far you're pushing the officers that we have and the job that they're doing. It's our responsibility to provide more for the Memphis Police Department to get more done for the citizens. So thank you very much. Seeing no other council members in the queue, we'll go to a voice vote. All those in favor of the Memphis Police Services operating budget signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, nay. Opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. Memphis Police Services operating budget is approved.
Thank you.
Do council members qualify for the reserve officer program? I think we're probably excluded from eligibility. But we have got one item left on the agenda, and it is the Memphis City Council operating budget, hot off the presses. It has been moved by Councilman Carlisle. Do I have a second? Second. I heard a second by Councilman Jones first. Chairman Colvette, if you will introduce yourself and your team. And then the floor is yours. We already have 6 members in the queue.
I just put in the first Nicorette, guys. Y'all go as long as you want.
Chairman, the floor is yours for presentation.
Now the mic works. Thank you. Good afternoon, colleagues. It is a pleasure to be here, and it is an honor to be your chairman for this year's Memphis City Council. I'm joined, obviously, by Brooke Hyman, our chief of staff, who, this being my first budget to present, your first budget to present, I do want to congratulate her on the front end. I think you've done an extraordinarily good job, and I look forward to presenting with you. So let's get it going.
So what you have before you, we had 2 presentations to go out, and with the help of Mr. Wanda Morris, we had some changes to our budget to accommodate some requests that we have, and I also passed out a spreadsheet that I submitted to the finance department, which includes some of the changes. So if we could just go to page 8, it kind of corresponds with the large spreadsheet that I gave you, with the exception in 2 places. In 52528 miscellaneous professional services, that should be 550 as the proposed, and then in seminars and training, it should be 15. So other than 52528, if you look on the second page of what I gave you, the first line, it says 52528 miscellaneous professional services. These are all account numbers and line items that correspond with one another. So other than that, all the other changes were incorporated into what was presented with the help of the finance team today. And so with those amendments.
It's also recognized page 9 in your packet and page 2 in your 11 by 17 handout. That concludes our presentation. Any questions?
Okay, I think
you were expecting what from me? How long did that take?
So for the legal purposes, do we need to make this as a motion? Okay, so will somebody make the motion to amend it?
Yeah, Chair, I move that we amend the City Council fiscal year 22 operating budget with the submitted document.
Okay, can we do it without objection? It sounds like we can do it without objection.
Without objection, Chair.
Okay.
Chair, I move the previous question.
Ooh. I am going to object to previous question.
Motion withdrawn.
Okay. And I would refer back to the organizational chart. If you look back into that in the presentation, where just above the city council sits the citizens of Memphis. And just as we go through the other parts of the budget, I think we owe it to them to have the same or even more scrutiny of our own in terms of some of the questioning. So I will start it off in talking about miscellaneous professional services and seeing that it is almost doubled in 2 years. Can we get a little bit more information about the increase in the need therefore?
So it has not doubled. Last year, there was an amendment made to add $250 to the budget. So the increase is only $50,000. That's to accommodate. We did ADA compliance this year and having interpreters. And rather than general services taking on that contract, we took on that contract. We're in the process of modifying our code so that it matches with online with what we use here in-house, and that's an ongoing project. So those two things are what did the increase, as well as we have a consultant that's agreed to stay on until August 31st while we search for a deputy chief of staff. So those are the increases.
Okay. It's a seemingly small thing, but it comes up. The catering budget forecast to spend it all this year. How so?
That's the normal forecast is for it to spend all this year because I don't know if you want to go to the 5-year trend on the page 21. I take that back. It's actually on 22. The very last page, 57454. It's the line item right above the total 505 for materials and supplies. We've spent around that, so that's not just the forecast for this year. It's our forecast for what we generally spend. So that is just the forecast. It's flat every year.
Well, okay. We'll generally see the forecast as what we're expected to spend in this fiscal year at this point. Yeah. And it's so small, but it's certainly a curiosity, especially seeing that where the March actual is, even though we're not back in person.
Yeah.
I'd have some questions about the travel budget, but I think I would not be in the majority opinion of the council on that. So I'll go to other council members for comments or questions. Seeing none, it was just me. Oh no, Councilman Johnson, I'm sorry.
You can depend on me.
All right, go for it. Swing away.
I got questions too. I'm back to this professional services, and this is just for clarification purposes for me because you assume a lot. Okay, Jigsaw. They are who? The lobbyists? Who are they?
That's our lobbyists.
Okay, what all do they do? Because I'm missing it during the year.
So each week, they give us a rundown of all the bills that are in Congress. They pass along any messages. They are very helpful and instrumental in getting our point directly to the governor and his team. They have connections with them, as do some of the Memphis people on the governor's team. So it helps us to know when the public meetings notices were going to be extended or not extended. They are able to give us information with our drag racing bill. They worked with state house representatives and senators for that to go through, as well as I want to say the hall tax is something they also worked on. So anything that we give them, they go take it up to the state level.
Okay. Does the city have lobbyists?
The mayor has a lobbyist as well. And while we're a unit sometimes, our legislative priorities are a little different than our executive priorities.
Okay.
Jigsaw presented, I don't think you were there at that part of the retreat.
I was.
I
heard it.
Yeah, that's what they were sharing. They are your lobbyists, not the mayor's, not anybody else's.
Beecher
and the other person. Yeah, I met them. I talked to no one was there. Community Impact Fund.
So that is a project each year that the council selects. When you guys heard about the Amnesty project earlier, that was our 2018 and 19 impact, followed by the $250,000 seed money that we gave to the hospitality hub for them to start the homeless initiative. And this year, Councilman Smiley has already put in a resolution to take $50,000 of that. And the remaining $200,000 is something that the council comes up with together to impact the community.
Okay, so you can make recommendations.
Yes, ma'am, you can make recommendations.
I missed that.
Yes.
I never heard of that before. Okay. I guess that answers my question for the 250, okay.
If I may, I just want to add something.
Yeah,
That's where the MLK 50 that we talked about,
Okay, I
Yes.
or in the front.
That was
Prior to that, yes.
2 years in a row we did that. It was $300,000 each year, and I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, but I think we reached like hundreds, if not more, people that we expunged their records for diversion cases and paid their drive while you pay fines off, so they were able to get a full license. And we've also partnered with the mayor's program to help them get some of their WOW and MAM participants on the right footing with that funding as well.
Thank you, Chair.
Councilman Carlisle?
Yeah, and, thank you, Councilwoman Johnson, for bringing that up. But last year, the majority of the things that are now in our budget, as I cautioned, but I'm happy they are, like the ADA, were seeded out of the Community Impact Fund, and now they've kind of moved into the operating line item. So to that point, I think at least in the next meeting, maybe in executive, we could discuss or have people submit ideas for the Community Impact Fund. It would be my hope and desire that we don't dice it up too much further, that we find something that this council, this is going to come shocking, could agree on to do in some large piece together, whether that be supporting the YMCA down in Whitehaven or the hub or Collins Chapel, whatever that may be. But maybe perhaps we could have some open dialogue about that next meeting. Thank you, Chair. I yield back, Chair Morgan.
Okay. Any other council members in the queue? All right, and I'll apologize for the spike on the health insurance choice plan line for FY21 forecast. That was my bad. I appreciate the flowers y'all sent me in the hospital. Seeing no other members in the queue, we'll go to a voice vote. All those in favor of the city council operating budget, hereby say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Madam Chair, ayes have it. Operating budget does pass.
Good job, Brooke.
City council.
Yeah, right.
Mr. Chair?
As amended.
You also had, 4 members reach 65 this year. That may have had something to do with this. 4 members that act early.
Chair, before we recess, I do have a couple questions for Chief Ford.
Okay, further business before this committee. Councilman Carlisle.
Well, while we're here, since it is budget, I still don't fully understand. It is hard for me to track how we are allocating. So I have an uptick, and we're just going to use arbitrary numbers, but I spent $1 million in additional overtime for fire to sub out at Pipkin. And I'm bringing in $114 million or whatever federal, FEMA line items there, care, materials and supplies. Will it be in the CAFR? How will we understand, let's say it was $20 million that we got into personnel services, where that money went on a division level and which personnel? So police spent $10 million, they got $10 million. How and when will we see that reconciliation?
So thank you. You will not see in our comprehensive annual report, which you're not allowed to call it that anymore.
What's it called now?
The comprehensive annual financial report or the annual report. We can't use it.
We can or you can't?
No, nobody can.
I guess.
It has to be removed from all printed yes.
Got it.
So just kind of FYI.
I'm sorry, but I think that's something of import for all of us. If there's a change in material and
it was announced by the GFOA that there would no longer be a use of that acronym. And so they're still trying to decide exactly if it's just now going to be called the annual report or the comprehensive report, but it cannot be referred to in that acronym.
Because of its derogatory history, particularly in the country of South Africa.
Correct.
Got it.
Okay.
Repeat the item. We missed it.
So, but I'm sorry, so back to your question. I apologize. We're trying to self-correct as well, because it's been that. It's been that. It will be either probably the annual report. So you will not see it specifically broken down like that, council. Now, one of the things I would be glad to provide for you, but one of the things that was required of us was to recognize it as revenue. Okay, and so remember when we set this all out last year, it was like we guesstimated how much would be related to police personnel, to fire personnel, to public works personnel and other personnel, all parks, libraries, the whole thing. So what we are required to do and what we have been doing is summarizing reports through the portal. And so we can give you a breakdown of that, but you're not going to see it broken down by division in our annual report.
Thank you, I appreciate that. I found it interesting, and we can talk about this later because I'm sure other people want to go, only because the regulations were so, I won't say stringent, but on the fly, stringent was some of the terms I think we used in order when we talk about grants, et cetera, but to just book it as revenue and say you have to use it for these things, and by the way, the government's going to come back and audit you, you need to be able to show that you used it for those things. So again, I just don't like it because it's hard to follow when you're not day in, day out.
I can certainly appreciate that. And as with the CARES, we continue to receive additional guidelines and regulations and what we could and what we could not do. But one thing was very specific in that for administrative ease, that piece for personnel could be in a lump sum.
Thank you, Chair. I yield.
All right. Seeing no other business for this committee, we're adjourned. Thank you, everybody, for the work today.